Okay, good morning. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order this meeting of May 13th, 2025. If everybody could please stand up and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll wait for Mr. Barrett to take a seat. Thank you. All right, I got a bit of a script here before we get to roll call. So I'm going to read it. I'd like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that at least a portion of this board meeting is conducted pursuant to California Government Code Section 54953, and that Director Powell is in Washington, D.C., and Director Nelson is in Monterey, California, and both will be participating remotely in accordance with the Ralph M. Brown Act. The teleconference location has been identified on the agenda for this meeting. And with that, if we could please take roll.
Yes, good morning. President Powell.
Here.
Vice President Estrada.
Here.
Director Bianco.
Here.
Director Aguilar.
Here.
And Director Nelson.
Here.
Thank you. All present.
Okay, good. So we have a few things here that we have to do with some questions. So I'm going to request that Director Powell and Director Nelson respond to the following questions. Director Powell and Director Nelson, can you both hear me well?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end up until now?
Yes. Yes, very clear.
Thank you. Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Thank you. Have you posted the agenda at the location where you're at?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Thank you. Is the location reasonably accessible to the public such that any member of the public could participate in this teleconference from your location if he or she wished to do so?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public there with you who would like to participate in the public comment portion of this meeting or otherwise address any agenda item for this meeting?
No. No, there's not.
All right. Thank you. And just as a reminder, all votes for this meeting will be taken by roll call. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or adjustments to the agenda?
No, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment?
I don't see anybody rushing to the podium, sir.
We do not. We
All
do
right.
have someone who, but for item C,
For
so I will
items
call
on
that
it.
individual up at the time that we are discussing that agenda item.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to consent calendar. Are there any items that the board would like to pull?
Mr. Vice President, please, if I could pull item E,
That was item
the
B.
legislative update on Senate Bill 466.
As in echo.
E, as an echo.
All right, so let's is there a motion to pass the rest of the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve
Okay,
the remaining.
all right, I'll second that. And then we'll move on to item E. So with that, can we have a roll call?
Vote.
Would
Take
you
the
like
vote
to take
first on the-
a
Yes.
vote on the consent calendar?
Yes.
Would you like to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0.
Okay.
Good morning.
Morning, Karen.
I just had a question. I don't have it with me, but in the staff report, it mentioned that there was going to be fairly soon either another committee discussion or it was scheduled for a full Senate floor vote. So can we have just an update as to any progress on this,
Yes.
please?
On Monday, our bill is headed to
Can you
the
speak up just a little?
yes. On Monday, our bill is headed to the Senate Appropriations Committee, where it will have like one final hearing at the committee level. The chair of the committee is Senator Caballero, who's also the author of our bill. So we expect that it will pass at the Appropriations Committee and head to the Senate floor. And then once it's voted on at the Senate floor, it will move to the State Assembly side for hearings, and we'll start the process all over again.
Great. And then are we expected to testify? Will we be
Likely in the Assembly, yes. At that point, it's when things get a little more dicey, even though they've been dicey so far. It's more critical for us to make sure that our testimonies and our witnesses and everything else are very well prepared and able to give testimony on behalf of CVWD.
Okay, I know you'll make sure we do that, so
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Karen,
Have no-
before,
Oh, sorry.
before you, so this is the last committee, and then it goes to the floor,
Correct.
and then has the bill been moving through any of the assembly committees also?
Not yet. So we
So-
have to get a vote at the Senate floor, and then it'll be sent to the committee, to the Assembly side.
Okay, so it has to get out of the Senate floor
Correct.
before it could start going through the committees at the assembly?
Yes.
Okay, good question, yeah.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other comments, I would move approval of consent calendar item E.
And I'll second that. Can we please have a roll call?
Yes. President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you. 5-0.
Thank you. With that, we're gonna move on now to, what is this? Is this ordinances for adoption? Right, 7A. And that's Finance Director Carla Romero.
Morning, Carla.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. I do have Michael Colantano on the line. Just want to make sure that he's available for any questions. This particular ordinance is a new proposed ordinance. It would actually add an additional Chapter 5.10 to the CVWD code. And the ordinance is mirrored with Assembly Bill 2257. It was adopted in September of 2024, and it addresses government code sections 53759.1 and 53759.2. It actually provides a new tool for the district defending against challenges to fees, charges, and assessments that are adopted under the Proposition 218 process. But there are certain new requirements that are required for us to follow under this new Assembly Bill 2257. And the ordinance further strengthens and solidifies that the district will be following these new processes during our proposed rate structures going forward. And the new process, in accordance with the Assembly Bill, is that we will issue a public notice 45 days prior to any public hearing date for the rates. The district does adopt rates increases for several rates on a yearly basis, so this would be a yearly requirement that we issue this notice 45 days prior. And the next slide lets you know what the current structure is for reporting notices this year. And if requested by a ratepayer or a property owner, we are to mail them additional information. But the public notice itself does have links to our website, to our budget hearing processes, to our proposed red-lined ordinances with the rate changes that are proposed with that 45-day notice in advance. The other requirement is that in bold 12 font or larger, that we provide that failure to provide any written comment prior to the public hearing bars any right to any challenges in court, and that if there is a challenge in court, the challenge is limited to that written comment that is provided in advance or during the public hearing date. And then all of those comments, something that is also new, is that all of those comments that are received need to be responded to in writing prior to the adoption of the rate, charges, or assessments. And so what you'll see is that during those public hearing dates, there will be legal counsel available to help address any written comments. And since those written comments could be a part of the record in the future, that's why we would want legal counsel to assist with those written responses. And then, and we are to address any of those in a timely manner prior to taking action on any of the proposed rate changes. Then as far as the current proposed rate changes for this fiscal year, we have been discussing a proposed rate change for the domestic fund of 5%, sanitation of 8.5%, and then we do have some canal cost of service study, which will be discussed later in the meeting today, and some proposed changes and Prop 218 process, Proposition 218 process with those canal rate changes. So we did on Friday issue a notice for both domestic and sanitation in order to meet the 45-day window and for us to adopt the budget on June 24th, 2025. Ideally, we would want to issue this sooner, which also means that our public budget process would need to start sooner in the future, maybe as December with initial reserve projections, recommendations, maybe move everything up about a month because we would want to have at least a 1 to 2 meeting cushion prior to the public hearing date to be able to adopt our budget. And so we'll be working with other departments to make sure that we have an amended schedule for our budget process to meet these deadlines in the future. So that's why we also issued the notice in accordance to AB 2257 on Friday prior to today's date. And today we are simply ratifying or formally adopting the process that we would be following under the Assembly Bill itself. If the canal cost of service study is adopted during this meeting, we would be preparing a public notice to be issued actually on the 21st, because I just learned that the 20th, the Desert Sun does not publish a newspaper on a Tuesday, so we did do it on a Wednesday, the 21st. The 45-day window would be July 5th, and the public hearing date, again, would be scheduled for July the 8th with an effective date of rates of August the 1st. And I'm happy to, Michael or I are happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the proposed ordinance.
Hi, Carla. I have a few questions. One is related to the public notice 45 days before. We had no requirement to have notices before?
We had, but the notices did not require us to have the specific information. Like it had a link to the proposed rate changes. It did not require us to have written comments prior to the board adopting the rates.
And so in this, with these new procedures, someone that failed to provide written comment would not be allowed to challenge the rates in court?
That is correct.
Okay. And does the bill require that the agencies adopt these new changes through their governing bodies, or is that just something that we're doing?
I'll have Michael answer that question for us, please.
These rules would apply whether you adopt them or not. We are adopting them a couple reasons. One is to put them in a place where we won't forget them. And two is to rationalize them, organize them, put them in a sensible order that staff can follow without support from council every minute of the way. The statute, as you can imagine, was heavily negotiated, and so the language came out looking a little bit like a camel with a couple of humps.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions from anybody here on the dais or on the phone?
No, thank you.
Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval of ordinance number 1436.
I'll second.
It's a motion, a second. Can we please have the roll call?
Yes, President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you. Passes
Carla.
5-0.
Thanks, Michael.
All right.
Okay, have a good
moving-
meeting.
Thanks, Michael. Moving on to administration, Mr. Robert Chang.
Good morning, board members.
Morning.
After several months of pretty intensive negotiations with Metropolitan, I'm pleased to bring this item forward for the board's consideration. And let's see, let me move forward. So the requested actions here are listed in front of you. The first one is to actually to authorize the general manager to execute the third amendment to delivery and exchange agreement for 35,000 acre feet. We'll refer to this as 35,000 acre feet agreement from here on. There's an option for a pre-delivery of 200,000 acre feet in 25 and 26, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And we recommend to exercise that option. And then also and the last two bullet items under this, or sub-bullet, are to pay for the pre-delivery costs with the appropriate funds, and also to amend the fiscal year 25 budget to include these funds at a later future board meeting. So today's meeting is just, or request is to extend the agreement to exercise the option for pre-delivery, and then also to authorize the board, to authorize the general manager and give him the authority to direct staff to look at the how to come up with the pre-delivery costs, which we'll bring at a future meeting. And then finally, the last two bullets are to make sure that our environmental requirements for this particular action are checked off. So before we launch too far deep into the nuts and bolts of the agreement, I think it's probably a good idea to make sure that we are all speaking from the same point of understanding on where these agreements are. So we've shown a chronology of the various agreements. Below the line, kind of highlighted in blue boxes, is our base agreement that we've set up with Metropolitan, Desert Water, and ourselves, which started in 1967 to assure that the water that we're getting from the State Water Project can be adequately exchanged consistently with Colorado River water for delivery to Whitewater. You'll see the timeline goes from 1967 to 2085. So the reason why 2085 is here is because each one of our agencies have agreements or contracts with Department of Water Resources, for our Table A water. So the original termination date for that agreement was 2035. So you'll see that a few bars from the right. When we negotiated with Metropolitan previously, 2035 was the effective deadline because we have not gone through contract extension with Department of Water Resources. However, since that time, since 2019, in the last 6 years, the contract extension has been completed and has been validated. So our contracts with Department of Water Resources are valid now until 2085. However, these other agreements that we have between our different agencies, whether it's between us and Metropolitan or between us, Metropolitan, and Desert Water, have not been extended out. So, the termination date still effectively is 2035. Why is that important? It's because our current agreements, between the agencies without DWR, all terminate in 2035. So, if we kind of pivot up to the contract, the 35,000 acre feet above the line, which are kind of shown in either the orange or the green, that's 35,000 acre foot exchange agreement. And you'll see that the start date on that was 2003, and that coincided with the quantification settlement agreement. So out of that, Metropolitan and CVWD reached agreement to provide 35,000 as part of that. We've had a few amendments to that, since before this year. One of the interesting things about that agreement is that Metropolitan has agreed to provide 35,000 acre feet to Coachella Valley Water District, but there's no specification on where the delivery point would be. So Metropolitan has 3 delivery points, or 3 different options for delivering water to CVWD. One is at Imperial Dam. Second is through the advanced delivery account that's resides underneath Whitewater spreading grounds. And third is the wet water delivery to Whitewater itself. I think at this point in time, the physical wet water delivery to Whitewater is the most attractive option because that water, once spread, the benefits of that water accrues to everybody in the valley. The uncertainty that was present, I think, in the previous versions of this amendment was that there was no certainty of delivery, wet water delivery to Whitewater every year. That changed in 2019 under the Second Amendment. And right now, the period of time that we're living in, we're operating under the Second Amendment. But the 2019 agreement is only effective from 2019 to 2026. So the certainty of delivery to Whitewater will expire next year without any additional action, by this board.
So people can follow along. The uncertainty was, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes, sir.
is that the water would have been delivered at Imperial Dam, which means that the water would be delivered through our canal system, correct?
Correct.
And so the only means of using that water would be for one, agriculture, which doesn't need it, and two, golf courses, which don't need it either. So that water would be lost. So what we're trying to do is move that water to Palm Springs and put it in our spreading basin. Okay.
Yes, sir. Exactly. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Which is very important for this valley. That
It-
we
it-
get
it
this
is very
agreement.
important.
Yes.
Can you say that again? The statement was that the reason there was no wet water was because there is water, but we just can't use it, or is there no water?
No, the 35,000 acre feet was originally supposed to be delivered through our canal system. Okay, and so we don't have a pipeline that goes from our canal system to
Right.
Palm Springs.
Oh, okay, but that's
so
not.
we're trying to get that water into Palm Springs so the whole valley can take advantage of it.
Right.
But we can move that water wherever we want right now up until 2026.
Correct. Under the current agreement,
Yeah.
we have the ability to move it up to Whitewater, which is what Director Bianco said.
Okay.
So yes, that is the maximum benefit that we
When did we
realize.
get? Was there a time where we didn't have that option and we were forced to take it at Imperial Dam?
Yes, I think before 2019, it was a very odd operating scenario. So the certainty of delivery, I think, as Director Bianco kind of pointed out, was always at Imperial Dam. However, we have not fully built out our use at that particular point. The delivery through the canal system. I think the farms and the golf courses, have enough water currently under our QSA water through IID and our base allotment, through our contract with Reclamation. So we were looking for a place to better use, the 35,000, and that really is at Whitewater, where we have our spreading grounds, and that's where a lot of the municipal uses are, for drawing out.
What type of is there a procedure in place where we get to decide where we want the delivery point to be, or is it fixed? Is it
Yes, there is.
what is that a year? As long as we let them know every year by a certain month, or what does that look like?
Well, we actually made it simpler in 2019 because up until that point, I think between like 2010 and 2019, it was kind of a year-to-year consultation with Metropolitan to see if they have enough delivery capacity in their canal system. And I guess one of the important things I neglected to say, kind of building on what Director Bianco said, is we have no physical ability to deliver the water up to the Palm Springs / Whitewater area. So we're completely dependent on Metropolitan through their Colorado River Aqueduct to move that water for us. So again, until 2019, there was no certainty of deliveries there. So we had to consult with Metropolitan each and every year to see if there's there's space available. That changed in 2019 because we basically said, hey, based on the last 10 years of operations, for the foreseeable future, the maximum benefits that we'll see is at Whitewater. So let's not make that the default, delivery location. If we get in a situation of unintentional overrun in our canal system, i.e. the farms and so on, we have the ability to make a call on that water for delivery at Imperial Dam. And, there's a mechanism that's pretty well documented, and that carries forward to, the Third Amendment as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that clarification. So what we're asking for is, through this action, is to extend this 35,000 under, certain terms that are carried over from the Second Amendment until 2035, and then we're making, just one pretty significant change to it, which is, the pre-delivery option, which I'll talk about. So I think in previous discussions with the board, the question was, okay, well, how come we can't just go straight and extend this past, 2035 deadline? And it certainly is Metropolitan's and CBWD's desire to extend that for as long as period as legally possible. Right now, we still have the issue of trying to get our base agreement, which is highlighted in Action 2, and extend that past 2035 to 2085. So once we get that in place, we will be able to have that discussion and negotiations with Metropolitan of extending that out to past 2035. And I know there's a lot of dates in here, and what we are hoping to do once we get past Action 2 on this diagram is to go to Action 3, which is extending the 35,000 out to 2077, which is coterminous with the ending date of the QSA. So I apologize for all the different dates in here, and sometimes it's hard for me to keep track myself. But so I thought this would help to kind of serve as the basis for talking.
So that was a question that I had about why, if it seems like there's two, you clarified it. I was wondering why it wouldn't be extended to 2085 like the contract agreements, and you've kind of clarified it that it's tied to the end of the QSA. And so for me, I'll just say this out loud is the idea that the QSA water was something that was not negotiated by the farmers. They're not paying for it, and so I keep trying to understand where did the water come from and where are we moving it. And as long as but this doesn't have a cost to it, does it? This water doesn't have a cost?
The 35,000?
Yes.
It does have a cost.
Does only the transportation, or is that the 400?
That's the $400 acre foot. That's
Okay.
The cost we can't change. It's the transportation we can, but
the percentages on how we pay for
Okay.
it.
correct.
All right.
Correct.
I'm trying to follow along. There's just a lot of agreements and a lot of water that's been created over the years, and I for me, as long as the water is following who pays for the cost, I think that's fair.
Right.
And I think sometimes when we start blending water, it starts getting foggy for me. So something to keep in mind.
Right. Well, certainly not our intention to make this more confusing than it is.
Okay.
So, anyways, and I guess the other item I neglected to say is we certainly have realized a lot of benefits, from this 35,000 exchange agreement. You'll see that, we've received 466,000 acre feet of wet water recharged in the last, 14 years or 15 years, under this agreement. So it's, it is, a healthy amount that we wouldn't have otherwise. Okay. So if I may move on to the key elements of the third agreement, and there's a lot of details in here which are in your board packets, but I'm going to try to distill it down into the key points. So the term goes from 2027 to 2035, which kind of picks up at the end of the Second Amendment, which we're in right now. The total volume that we've negotiated with Metropolitan for is 315,000 acre feet total, and the structure of the payment is kind of shown in this table. So I kind of break it down into 25 and 26, and then from 2027 to 2035 in these different rows. There's two different columns of costs, which we'll kind of break down into option 1 and option 2. So option 1, there's a 200,000 acre feet pre-delivery option that Metropolitan is offering to us. And option 2, for the sake of simplicity, is I call it no pre-delivery, but in reality you can go all the way up to 200,000 or 199,999 acre feet. So under option 1, we're talking about delivering 200,000 acre feet to be negotiated when between Metropolitan and CVWD. And the base cost for this is $400 acre foot. So at 200,000 acre feet, that comes out to be a one-time cost of $80 million. And we'll talk about how that monies get apportioned to the funds in a minute. So for option 2, obviously there's no pre-delivery, so there's no payments. So I think the interesting thing, what happens is the delivery in 2735, and as well as the cost. So let's say that we're able to, the board agrees to the pre-delivery of 200,000. That means that we have 115,000 acre feet total to be apportioned for the remaining 9 years of the agreement. So that means that we have 12,778 acre feet delivery every year. And for the cost on that is $400 acre foot. So there is no escalation all the way up until 2027, but 27 to 35, there is an escalation factor. So the primary difference between these two options is what the escalation factor looks like. So for 200,000 acre feet pre-delivery option 1, Metropolitan is willing to give us a discounted escalator factor of 3.9%. However, for option 2, they're at 4.8%. And in discussions with Metropolitan, this is the 4.8% is sort of like the default escalator that their finance department has come up with for their other water exchange agreements. So I think Metropolitan recognizes the value of the relationship that we have, and I think there's a desire for them to move to 200,000 when it's available. So they're willing to kind of offer, a discounted rate on the escalator for us. And it is significant. And you'll see in a minute here that it amounts to over $24 million, through the pre-purchase option and, this discounted rate over the life of the agreement. So the, kind of address one of the questions earlier. This water actually has origins in State Water Project, namely Metropolitan's Table A. So of the $400 acre foot, a portion of that's attributed to the transportation cost on the State Water Project can be used by the State Water Project Fund, our State Water Project Fund legally. And the rest of it has to be paid by non-State Water Project Fund. And I think the current practice right now is to use the West RAC, since the West RAC is the is the fund that actually realizes the benefits.
What is that percentage?
That percentage is roughly 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 for State Water Project and 1/3 for the West RAC.
Is that 400 all in?
$400 is all in.
Okay.
So you're saying 2/3 of the roughly $80 million we can use State Water Project tax revenue.
Yes, sir. Roughly.
And then 1/3 we would use straight out of the West RAC.
Or some non-State Water Project, fund, that's legally defensible.
And so, is the cost of the $80 million, is that spread out over 2 years, or is it's spread out?
It's over 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Yes, sir.
So we can split it out. Would it be roughly 50-50?
I think for budgeting purposes, I'd say 50-50 is rational. So I think those numbers are exact, probably about like $12.5, $13 million a year. I think finance has the exact values that we gave them.
Has finance gone through and looked at how we can pay for this?
They have,
Okay.
but we just thought that at least today we should go through and get the approval for the concept here. And I know finance is working, diligently on trying to come up with some good options, I think, for the board to consider on how to pay for this.
Well, I mean, I like this. I mean, we're going to save the taxpayers $24 million, but can we afford it? And so if we can afford
Yes,
it,
sir.
and we don't have, we may have some short-term pains for some long-term gains.
Right.
It looks good to me, and I like getting the water here, in the valley as soon as possible.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen in the future.
Completely agree. And I know that in discussions with finance, and I know that there's still some vetting that they need to go through on the different options. But I think we can safely say that yes, I think we do have the money. I think it's just the mechanism that the board is comfortable with in paying for this portion that is non-state water project.
Well, I have a question related to that because, full disclosure, I met with Robert and Jim yesterday to discuss some of the details of this proposal, which I missed actually at one of the previous meetings. But, this is going to require an increase in the rack rate for some period of time to cover the interfund loan. So do we have a sense of how much of an increase and how that interfund loan is going to work? And does the WAC rate go down after we pay that off? How does that work? Please.
Absolutely. Of course, a complicated answer to your question. There's a couple of things that we've been able to adjust down. If this proposal is approved, the future cost of water is also reduced, and so that changes the budget projections. We also removed the Rosedale Bravo water from the West Rack, and so that lowered some of the assumptions as well for expenses for future years. And when we're looking at this future savings, if 34% of it is paid by West Rack, we're talking about $8.3 million of savings for West Rack. And so when we're talking about an interfund loan, potentially from sanitation fund, we're wanting to make sure that the interest that is repaid with that loan is less than the savings, right? Because you ultimately want to continue to have some savings. And so we are configuring different loan options for the board to consider. We've come up with 3 different scenarios. One, if you did the full $27 million for an interfund loan up to 15 years. However, the interest repayment is slightly higher than the savings. So maybe that's not the best option. We also have about $5 million in unassigned reserves within West Rack that can be utilized to offset or lower the amount of the interfund loan. If we did that, the interfund loan would be reduced to about $22.6 million. And of course, the interest is also reduced to about $6.8 million over a 13-year repayment period. And then we also came up with a third option. In addition to the $5 million in the West Replenishment Fund of excess reserves, we also have about $3.5 million in the supplemental water supply charge. So if we added both of those together and reduced the interfund loan to about $19 million, then it could be paid back in 11 years, and the interest would be about $5 million. And in each one of these scenarios, because we have made those other reductions to expenses, we may not need a rate increase, and if we did, it'd be somewhere between 3 and 5% is what our initial projections are. It just depends on which direction the board gives us.
Okay.
Carl, how much do we have in the reserves for the West?
We just took a look at that yesterday again. We have right now about almost 13 million, and the assigned portion is about 8.3 million. And so the excess is about 4.6 million.
So we could also dip into some of that too, because this is
correct. You could go below the reserve target, and then there's a 5-year within the reserve policy. There's a 5-year ramp up where you would want to replenish those reserves, and it again may require a rate increase to do so.
Yeah. Well, speaking just as one board member, I would encourage you to do what you can to keep that rate lower.
One of the things that drives the rate, Director Aguilar, is the projects that are being carried within the fund.
Mm-hmm.
And some time ago, we had an exercise where we were trying to get a sense of what the cost for water was per project. And I think they vary, right? Some might be small, some might be larger, but you know, I say that because I think, you know, this is a pretty good price per acre foot of water. And I believe that maybe, I don't recall from the top of my head, but if there are any projects or portion of projects that are being carried by the West Rack where an analysis would suggest that, you know, you're paying $1,000 an acre foot by making those connections or extending pipe, then those might be areas I think where we can maybe push those projects out, because I mean those are the projects that are costly. And so I don't know to what extent we've made commitments with design, and I know that that's sometimes the things that keep us on those projects, because we've already made expenditures, we've already made commitments. But to the extent that there might be new projects that are outside of whatever we've committed to, you know, those might be areas where we could perhaps slow down some of those. I mean, you think about
just to help us catch up a little bit.
well, yeah, because you think about the West Rack, and I think, you know, the amount of projects that it's carried, it's carried a lot of projects. You know, probably upwards of 50 million, probably more coming. I mean, those are just kind of numbers that I kind of vaguely remember, but it's probably more than that, right? It carries a lot of projects, and we're being pretty aggressive with our program, and I think for good cause, and but there's only so much money we have to spend. You know, are we going to use it for these types of strategies, or are we going to use it to continue our other programs? And so there's only so much coins that we can use, and so we can't use them all at the same time. And so those are just kind of some thoughts that I wanted to share.
I appreciate
Because
that. And there may be a way to do both. I mean, the number that I saw was close to 15% increase, and that seems really high. So I don't want to do that.
So what we would propose is, if this is approved today, we would come back at the next meeting with all of those different loan options for the board to give us some firm direction, and then bring back the resolution along with the repayment schedule at the first meeting in June, which is now scheduled for the 17th.
Thank you. Great. Thanks.
if there's anything, Carla, in that when you bring those projections back, that seems like it's an outlying project that we haven't really committed to, and if it's significant enough to where if we put it on pause or we don't do it, it reduces the rate increase. I'd like to be able to pinpoint and see that that's something that we could perhaps reconsider. But I know that there's a lot of things that are already baking, so maybe there's nothing.
Okay, good. That's good.
Okay, well, thank you for that robust discussion, and that this is the reason why I think, kind of splitting out the discussion on, the payment options, was a good idea, because I think this discussion is already, long enough as it is, just on the concepts. So appreciate it. And just kind of close out this, this slide. I think it's worth mentioning that we CVWD has started working with Desert and Metropolitan on the extension of the base agreement, if you will, and we started last week, and hopefully we'll be done, by the first of the next year. This next slide, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but it's just simply kind of provide you with a look of how the escalations appear, for the two different options under 3.9 and 4.8%. And you'll see in here that we have built out options, for delivery to Whitewater and also to Imperial Dam, as one of the questions, was asked before. This slide, simply provides a future value of savings that we accrue by, the differences in the rates or escalators, as well as purchasing water in 25 and 26, at $400 unescalated. So again, you'll see it comes out to be about 24.5 million. We did do a present value analysis on it, recognizing there's a lot of variables that you can put in there, discount factors and so on, and we did come out with a positive number. So that means that the I think that this the savings is real, even if you kind of bring it back to the present. So with that, I think we've already talked about what the requested actions are, and if there's if no, I don't have anything else to add at this point, and so I'll just kind of open it up for any further questions that the board might have.
Just one more clarification, Robert.
Yeah.
Do you see coming back with the next steps that we would need to take action on if we were to pull the trigger on the pre-delivery? So that's going to come back to us as as an action item, right?
Yes, that's right. So I think just to be completely clear, so today's actions are to obviously to extend, authorize the general manager to extend the agreement. Staff is recommending that we look at 200,000 acre foot pre-delivery contingent on what the options look like at the next meeting, and then for us to kind of follow the the CEQA documentation for this. So yes, you will have a chance to kind of select which option that you like in terms of the how to pay for the 200,000. I think staff has already indicated that we do have the money. It's just how does what comfort level does the board have with each one of the options that our finance director kind of laid out verbally.
There's much more positives to the advanced delivery. That there is one negative, and the one negative is that once the pre-delivery is set, okay, and they send the 200,000 acre feet, the most you will get if you change your mind into year 3 or 4, the most you will ever get is 12,000 acre feet a year into the East Valley if you need it. But you look ahead over the next 10 years, and I don't see us ever needing that water, at least for the next decade.
No,
I don't see us needing that water.
I think there's more positives.
Yes.
And the only negative is the rate increase to the West Rack.
Correct.
And if we can resolve that, then I think it's mostly positive.
And maybe just kind of expand a little bit, on the point of the pre-delivery. I think, as the board well know, we're in the midst of negotiations on the Colorado River. And I think there's a great deal of hesitancy on Metropolitan's part to kind of commit to anything past 2026. Because none of us really know what the river looks like, except we know that the numbers that we have are probably going to go down. By how much, we don't know. So I think in order to get Metropolitan to this point, was a pretty big lift to go past 2026. I think the opportunity is good. I do not know what the deliveries look like, going in the future. Metropolitan has signaled as much. So I think right now, we're catching Metropolitan in an opportune time. And I agree with the comments. I'd rather have the water delivered here while we know it can be delivered and get the benefits earlier, rather than later. But whatever that looks like, Metropolitan is still on the hook to deliver us, the entire 315,000 by the end of 2035. Similar to the current arrangement, they don't have to make deliveries every year because, the swings on the state water project, might dictate that they, use more of their Colorado River aqueduct for drinking purposes, rather than for us to put in the ground. So, just a little point of clarification.
So could I make a couple comments?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, Robert, so I know this has been back and forth for a while, and I really appreciate the effort because, we never know exactly how strong our position is, and so the opportunity to negotiate and advocate for our position, I think it went pretty well. On the inflator, the 3.9 is obviously better than 4.8. And you look at how those numbers run through the 9 years, and you get to 2035 and you see $564 compared to $610 an acre foot. So that's obviously a much better price. Still high, but it's a much better price than 610. And so my question is, or maybe just as something to think about, is when we do the next leg of this deal, are we starting at 564 at that point? If and going from there? You know, I mean, I guess I know we haven't done it yet, but what's the price in 2036? And I guess it would make sense to start at 564 since that's where we would leave off. And would we be, you know, think about how we might be able to carry that Coachella rate of 3.9 forward. Of course, we don't know what the rates are going to look like then anyways, interest in general, or inflation. But something to think about, you know, see if we can carry it forward beyond that 2035 so that we can hopefully benefit from that good relationship going forward with that lower rate. And then also, Carla, on you provided 3 alternatives for paying the interfund loan, and I mean it does sound pretty encouraging that we can find a way to get this where, you know, it probably does not have a rate impact on the West Rack. And I think that's logical because overall it's a savings. And so doing something that saves, even in a net present value scenario, should not drive a rate increase. And I think if we do it right, we'll find how to make that work. So I appreciate that. Those are my comments. I think it's a good, I mean, I'm in favor of doing the pre-delivery and sort of having that bird in the hand. I think it's a good thing.
Okay, thank you, Director Nelson. Any comments from you?
Yeah, I think this is a good deal for a number of reasons. One, it provides us this certainty that we directed Robert to go negotiate for, and with the 3.9% inflator, it not only does it give us a good starting point in today's market rate for water cost, but up through 2035. So it really is cost effective for our residents. But in addition to that, it really does meet a need for Metropolitan to offload some of its historically high stored water, where their system, because of 2023, where they had a 100% allocation on the State Water Project, they're building up maximum supplies on their ICS in Lake Mead. And so, you know, this is a good time because we've had some wet years that we can take advantage of with these lower prices and pre-delivery. So it's really a win-win-win. It's a win-win-win. It's a win for our district. It's a win for Metropolitan, and it's a win for our residents here in trying to keep those rack rates low. And it really does meet supply needs for, you know, all the residents. And Carla has some really good options in our packet for us to think about. So this is all good stuff, and I would move approval of this item. Let's see, hang on a second. This item 8A to extend the agreement with the Metropolitan Water District for the 35,000 acre feet over the 10 years. And I guess we'll approve the options next week, but I'll make the motion to approve the extension of the agreement.
Okay, there's a motion. Second. There's a second. And yes, looking forward to having a conversation on options. Can we please have the roll call?
Yes, President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes
Thank you, Robert.
5-0.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
All right, moving on with engineering, item from Mr. David Wilson.
Oh, I'm recusing on this one, Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah, so prior to the consideration of this item, President John Powell will be recusing himself because of a real property interest within the area that is affected by this project. As a result, we will put Mr. Powell in the waiting room of the Zoom and then return him after this item.
Okay, you let us know when we can start then.
Okay, he is in the waiting room and has no longer access to the meeting.
All
Good
right,
morning.
David. Good morning.
This confusing red is on. The purpose of this item is to authorize the. Green is on.
You need green.
I'm the confused one, okay. The purpose of this item is to authorize the general manager to execute a construction contract with Mamco Incorporated, doing business as Alabasi, as the lowest responsive and responsible bidder in the amount of $5,333,333 for the irrigation lateral 123-45-1322 division box and pipeline replacement project. The request also includes authorization for the general manager to execute a sole source professional services agreement to Lee and Rowe and Michael Baker as the engineers of record in the amount of, for construction support in the amount of $88,062 and $174,920 respectively, as well as task order number 1 to Converse Consultants for geotechnical and concrete testing services during construction. The total cost of this request, which also includes project management from CBWD, inspection services, cultural monitoring, Riverside County encroachment permit fees, and a 5% contingency, is $6,305,754. The project is included in the current fiscal year capital improvement budget in the amount of $600,000. It's a multi-year project. It's expected that we will spend the $600,000 this fiscal year, and we will budget and spend the remaining next fiscal year. The project was also included or awarded loan funding from the United States Department of the Interior, bipartisan infrastructure law loans that was facilitated through the Bureau of Reclamation. There is some background information in your board packet. I've gone over the project itself in the past, but I'll stop there and give you an opportunity for any questions.
No, this is part of those projects that we've been working on, as you mentioned, on the project list from the Bureau. And so I ask this question all the time. How many do we have left? Do we have 5 more? It was a list of what, 10?
I think we had 11. We had 11. Including the mid-canal storage. So this one is, I believe that's 9 left.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean,
that's 8. I'm sorry, that's 8. We awarded one earlier this year.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to.
I have a comment,
Go
if I
ahead.
might first. Sorry, Anthony, but so I mentioned this before that I'm uncomfortable doing more business with this company. This is the company that sued us. Is that correct?
They are. I believe that was about 5 years ago.
Yeah. So, but they litigated against us. That's one thing, and the other thing is I noticed that in their list of subcontractors, they have 2 subcontractors. One's for electrical work, the other is for something else, I forget. And neither of them are from here in the valley. In fact, one is actually from Big Bear. And I find it hard to believe that they could not find somebody here in the valley to do that work. So that's kind of my thing. I've said it before. I'm probably going to vote no on this today for those reasons. That's it. Thank you.
And just to follow up on it, because I do think it's important that we try to make use of our dollars for the benefit of folks here in our valley. And so, but to just clarify, there are some DBE things that they have to try to comply with, right, as part of maybe the funding. And so, because I think I see where they've I don't know if this is good faith effort or signing that they've done it, that they've gone through the process of trying to, and then they're saying they didn't find anybody. Is that?
Yes, they have to demonstrate that they put in a good faith effort. There's no requirement specifically to have a DBE, but they have to demonstrate a good faith effort.
Okay. Any other comments? Any comments, Director Nelson?
So in response to, I understand John's concerns and valid concerns. Question I would have then, Laurel Ag, I believe, is based up in the Central Valley. of California, which is further away than Big Bear. That probably makes no difference. But did Laurel Ag, John, do you know if they had any, as the next lowest bidder, did they have any local contractors that they were going to utilize in there?
I'm sorry, that question was for me.
Well, for anyone who might know if there were any local subcontractors in any of the other bids.
I'm not aware of any.
So yeah, that's John, that's a problem across the board, right, with all the bidders, which is unfortunate. And I think to your point is we should continue to try and utilize electrical contractors or other contractors that are of local nature in the valley. So there we have it. I'll move approval of the item to get it going. I'll move approval.
I believe we did have a
Bianco.
prior motion from Director Bianco, so Director Nelson, if you would like to second that.
I'll second
Okay,
that motion.
thank you.
And before we go further, I think it's important to recognize that, at least within the state of California, the contracting codes don't necessarily require goals in the use of federal funds. I think there are recommendations which are different than the state of California. But I'd have to defer to Jeff to comment on whether or not it's possible for us to include scoring elements that would provide more favor to the use of local contractors. If that's not possible, then there's really not much we can do to compel or even request that local firms be given higher consideration. I mean, this is a business for these guys. If they get a cheaper price from somebody out of town, I don't know how that happens, but it's really up to them to construct their bids, and we can only evaluate what they submit. We can't really go back and request that they adjust. It's either got to be in the specifications at the front end, or it can't be considered.
Yeah, Jim, hey, I'm totally aware of that. I mean, this is not, I mean, you know my background, and I'm familiar with all of those caveats, but it doesn't mean that we can't continue to try. I mean, we just recently attended, I think Scott or somebody else attended a workshop in one of our other public agencies where they were giving out information about how to do business with that agency. You know, maybe we can look at doing more of that. So my only point is that I just can't believe that there are not firms in this valley that can do this work. And I don't know, maybe there are other things we can look at doing. So I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but it's something that is distasteful to me.
Yeah, there ought to be a way. I mean, there's I think grants that I think some of us here might be familiar with, and those have goals, and it seems that, well, to your point, Jim, if there's nothing we could do about it, then that's the end of that. But I think we ought to look into it. If there's a way, then we ought to hear about it and consider it. And so, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, there are issues with having a buy local or a local contractor policy. They're very difficult to draft or enforce unless there's some reason for the project itself that the contractor be local. We've looked at that issue before, and we can certainly bring up what we talked about in the past, but it's difficult to have a buy local policy for these types of public works contracts. You can certainly have a DBE or WBE if the project calls for that. But to Director Aguilar's point, in terms of outreach for those who want to bid on the projects of the district, that can certainly be part of the outreach. It just can't be a part of the legal standard for the contract award. And then just for the record, in terms of not awarding a contract to a contractor who has sued the district, we're obligated to award the contract to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. That means does the bid respond to what we asked to be built? Then it becomes, is this bidder responsible? And in order to find a contractor not responsible, it has to be based on their work performance, their financial viability, if they've engaged in any improper activity, things of that nature. And if the board were to go through that process, you would have to provide a hearing and an opportunity for the bidder to respond thereto. And then if the bidder didn't agree with the outcome of that hearing, then they could pursue legal action. I've only seen it prevail in legal action if the lowest bidder had engaged in fraud, didn't have financial viability, or engaged in financial misdoing, things of that nature. So I get the point. It's understandable, but as a public agency obligated to take the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, I understand the concern, but that wouldn't be enough to disbar this contract.
Hey, Jeff, so I have a question. What does it mean by obligated? I thought the district had discretion in not required to take the lowest bidder, that they could take any bidder they wanted for whatever reason they wanted.
For public works construction, it's very regimented. For professional services agreements, it's not so.
Okay. So the difference is between professional services agreement and public works project.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Jeff, is there anything that prevents us from including some of the procedures that I think we're kind of pushed to abide by when we use these types of federal dollars or even some state dollars, where it encourages that forms get filled out that show good faith effort, that they've reached out to DBEs, not necessarily that it might play too much into the overall scoring of the contractor, but simply as to Director Aguilar's comment, it's at least a form that we know contractors are engaging in good faith, that they're advertising their subcontracting work through some type of notification process. Are those things that we would be able to include within our own bidding procedures?
Yes, I think we do. For the particular project where those are requirements, there is an obligation to show good faith. So, yes.
No, I get that. I get that that we do those when we're required by the awarding agency that is providing the funds, that we do those things. But would we be able to adopt some of those for all projects?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay, that would be something good to answer.
Yeah, I would just caution that when we start including those as part of the evaluation process, it's information that they're not required to provide. And if we use that as the basis for award, it could open us up.
Yeah, no, I'm speaking of a scenario where that wouldn't necessarily be the reason why you award a project, but
if you require that information and you use it in the evaluation, and it's not required by state law or federal law, it is basically influencing the decision because you've asked for it, you've considered it. How can you not say it wasn't involved in the selection process?
Yeah,
that's my concern.
It's a very complicated issue. Let me give you I will look into our public works contracting team that works with staff here, can certainly answer that question much more detailed than I could in terms of whether these WBE, DBE could be applied to all contracts regardless of grant funding.
Maybe another way to just ask the question is if you could give us a list of any agency to your knowledge that's a public agency, whether it's a school district, a special district, a city, that has established procedures on this type of topic. If you could just let us know.
And that's one of the factors. is whether it's a city or a school district or a special district. But I'll certainly provide you that back.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. All right. There's a motion and there's a second. Can we please have the roll call?
Yes, President Powell? Oh, I'm sorry. He's recused. I apologize. Have it. Sorry.
It was a trick question.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
No.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Okay, 3-1.
Yeah. If you could please bring that back. Yeah, this
that
would have
can
been
certainly be
weird
part
if
of the
I
general counsel
would have
report.
voted no on it. But
Yeah,
if
let
you
me-
could please bring it back.
I'll bring it back in terms of the general counsel report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did we lose John?
John, you're on your back. Okay.
Yeah, I think it would feel weird if I would have voted no. But
All right.
yeah,
We moving on to item D. Okay, C. I'm sorry, I skipped that
And
one.
that should be Rob. Yep.
Robert.
And we will have a public speaker. So following staff's presentation, Mr. Vitrano, you'll have an opportunity to speak. I'm not sure who that is. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Barrett, members of the board. Name is Robert Schull. I'm your engineering services manager. I have before you here, this is an amended and restated agreement for purchase and sale. This is with the Outdoor Resorts and Palm Springs Owner Association. This is for portions of our property in this is at well site 4566. You've seen this before. This has been before you, and in June 2022, the district originally entered into an agreement with the owners, the Outdoor Resorts and Palm Springs Owners Association. This is for purchase of portions of the well site here. Those are shown as Exhibit B and Exhibit D in the figure. The Exhibit B portion there was a purchase there. That's to take care of a trespass issue, and Exhibit D was for a walkway that was going to go to potentially a future dog park. This agreement is we're asking to amend and restate the agreement here to make the Exhibit D portion optional, which is that portion that is potentially a walkway that goes to the property to the north, because the dog park might not come to fruition here. So this would be a $30,000 sale here. This would be considered like excess property. If the owner does want to purchase Exhibit D or make that part of the agreement, they can do so. They have 1 year to do that at their option. If they do that, there's an existing block wall between Exhibit D and Exhibit B. That wall would have to be moved 9 feet to the west in order to secure our well site property. So with that there, we ask there that the board authorize the general manager to execute an amended and restated agreement for purchase and sale of real estate with Outdoor Resorts and the Palm Springs Owners Association for the sale of a portion of APN 673-020-004. I'd be happy to ask or answer any questions the board has.
So we're selling a portion of it.
That's correct.
Okay, and there's options. Option D is the option. Why is there already construction on portion B? That they're already using it.
So the parking lot portion here, which is a southern portion, that's highlighted in yellow. That's an existing parking lot. They've occupied it there. There's a dog run on the western part of it there. So yeah, they put some improvements in there. And then on the north-south portion, that's highlighted in yellow, that's an existing hedge that's encroached into our property. An existing block wall is on the western side of that hedge.
Okay, we don't have any use for the yellow portion that they're already using.
Correct. It's already on a hedge. It's on a slope, and even there with the Exhibit D portion, which is potentially that future walkway. We've gone through the appraisal and determined there's no value to that either.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve.
And I'm sorry, we do have a public comment on this item.
Okay, there's a motion. We'll take the public comment. Is there a second? Might as well have a second if there's a second.
Second.
There's a second, so we'll do the roll call after the public comment.
Good morning, board members. I hope you anticipate that my comments are somewhat tongue-in-cheek this morning to provide some levity, because I understand the seriousness of some of the things you're doing. I'm finding it a little bit odd that I'm here, hoping that this is only a formality. And yet I find myself curious that I'm here as a result of driving an hour, getting up early, foregoing my usual healthy breakfast to be at an 8 o'clock board meeting, which I know the board meetings can be at different times. So forgive me if my voice is not as strong as a result of me missing my breakfast this morning. My name is Ed Vetrano. I'm the past general manager for Outdoor Resort. When I arrived at the community some 5 years ago, this was already 1 year to 2 years old. And I was astonished and expressed my astonishment to the board to say, I'm surprised that this didn't get done within 90 days. That was 7 years ago. I've appreciated Chris Bogan's guidance during this meandering route. There's only one correction that I probably need to make, is the larger area to the south has been used by the resort for almost 40 years. I think it was unintentionally used, but nonetheless it was used, and this is simply a formality to now pay for that surplus real estate. The corridor to the east, the only correction I would like to make is there's a wall that has been on the property, which is a 4 to 4.5 foot high wall, which will remain. The requirements of the agreement would be that a new 6-foot wall would be built by the association, assuming that the association will take its year-long rights of calling it, if that's what you would call it, to create a corridor from the area, the parking lot area, to a dog park that is to be built on the cannabis facility immediately to the west. That agreement for the use of that dog park, of which the city of Cathedral City has indicated that they will continue to insist on being built, is a bit in limbo. You may have heard in the news that this has been a recent issue with the cannabis operation and the odor that's exhibiting from it during their operation. Therefore, the board of directors of the resort has stopped communication with them regarding that until the odor control is somewhat fixed. So I don't know that, but as far as I know, that dog park will still be built. The second reason that I find it odd that I'm here this morning is, again, because I assume it's a formality. I'm encouraging the board to adopt the resolution, is that you will find nobody more eager to cut a check for $30,000 to the CVWD on behalf of the resort. I am chagrined that I was not able to finish this project before my retirement, but at least I'm hoping that today with your vote, that at least this meandering road can have a sign that says road closed. And I appreciate your consideration of the issue and would answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Can we have a roll call?
President Powell?
Aye.
Vice President Estrada?
Yes.
Director Bianco?
Aye.
Director Aguilar?
Aye.
And Director Nelson?
Aye.
Thank you. Passes
Hey.
5-0.
Thank you. Robert, you have the next one.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll stay parked here. What I have you before you here, this is a special domestic water and sanitation system agreement. This is with Palm Creek Ranch in the Thousand Palms area. So Palm Creek Ranch LLC, they're proposing approximately a 900 unit residential unit development with 3 community centers. It's on approximately 109 acres of land, like I said, in Thousand Oaks. Some of the major points here of the agreement on the water side here, they are responsible for installing a pressure reducing station. This would be on the south side of the development here, which is Ramon Road. They would also be responsible for completing a 12-inch domestic water loop. This is about 7,400 feet of water main. That is shown in red on this figure here, and that will help complete this loop up Desert Moon Drive in Vista del Sol. And they will also pay a reservoir fee in the amount of $203,731.20 to go towards a potential future reservoir site. And then on the wastewater side, thank you so much, Yolanda. They have a 10-inch gravity sewer that will collect wastewater from their development and take it to our trunk sewer at the intersection of Monterey and Varner Road. That's shown in red on this figure. And then they also have approximately 375 feet of 18-inch gravity sewer. This is shown here kind of on the bottom left in yellow. The district is interested in oversizing this pipeline to a 36-inch gravity sewer. We estimate the cost of this to be approximately $65,000. We would be responsible for the portion here based on actual bids. If bids come in greater than that $65,000, then we will be back in front of the board to request additional funds at that time. With that, the recommended action is that the board authorize the general manager to execute a special domestic water system and sanitation system installation agreement with Palm Creek Ranch LLC. And also that the authorize the general manager to reimburse Palm Creek Ranch up to $65,000 for the cost to oversize a proposed 18-inch diameter gravity sewer pipeline to a 36-inch gravity sewer pipeline based on competitive bids. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions the board has.
Any questions? No questions. I just have a general comment. Sounds like there's a lot of projects that are, I think, being impacted by that line there on Varner Road. I think that 36-inch gravity sewer that you're proposing to upsize. So, hoping that all of those things are moving along, and so I think I'm hearing that there's good progress. So thank you for that. But it does seem like it's for whatever reason that area there seems to be pretty active. So
very busy.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
What golf course is south of that? What is that one?
Yeah, I couldn't tell. Olivia knows.
Tri Palms? Okay.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can we get a Director Nelson, Director Powell? Any comments?
No questions.
No questions. Okay, we'll have a roll call.
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you. 5-0.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay, moving on to Environmental Services E, Jared Dawson.
Good morning, directors. My name is Jared Dawson. I am a Water Resources Associate here at CVWD. Today's item consists of requesting approval for the water supply assessment for the Desert Hot Springs Newland project. The Desert Hot Springs Newland project is located in the northwest portion of the Coachella Valley within the incorporated limits of Desert Hot Springs. The project is bounded by Varner Road to the north, West Drive to the east, and the I-10 freeway to the south and west, as depicted in the project regional location and vicinity maps before you. I've included a project site plan, but we can move forward for now and come back if there's any questions about this later. On to project land use. The project encompasses approximately 123.4 acres of vacant land to include up to 1,500,000 square feet of distribution warehouse, 38.7 acres of dedicated to open space, and 21.7 acres of roadway improvements. The project projects an indoor commercial and industrial demand of 42.37 acre feet per year and an outdoor irrigation demand of 30.59 acre feet per year for a total project water demand of 72.94 acre feet per year. This equates to 0.59 acre feet per acre. This WSA has been prepared in compliance with the requirements set forth in Senate Bill 610 and 1262 by Terra Nova Planning and Research in consultation with CVWD and the City of Desert Hot Springs. This WSA does not relieve the project from complying with all applicable state, county, city, and local ordinances or regulations, including the CVWD Landscape Ordinance, nor does it constitute an agreement to provide water services to the project, and does not entitle the project applicant, or any other person or entity to any right, priority, or allocation in any capacity. I will wrap up my presentation. We have a couple of folks from Terra Nova here as well if we have any questions about the project or the WSA.
You always show the percentage of the total planned increases. I was looking for it. I found it in the report, but it's like super minimal, right? So
very much so.
So I think there's no real issues here. Any comments, questions from the board?
No, I would move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Nelson.
There's a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, can we get the roll call?
President Powell.
Aye.
Vice President Estrada.
Yes.
Director Bianco.
Aye.
Director Aguilar.
Aye.
And Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes
Thank you very
5-0.
much.
Thank you, Jared. All right, moving on to Finance F. Ms. Carla Romero.
Good morning again. All right. So here we are again talking about our pension and OPEB trust. We had originally provided an overview of our pension obligation in December to the board, and then also a recommendation to open a combination PARS and OPEB trust. We discussed this also at our finance committee meeting, and today are asking for direction to go ahead and execute the agreement with PARS in order to solidify the next steps in establishing the trust. Just as a point of reference, PARS has been in business for about 41 years, and they partner with PFM as the investment advisor for the last 5 years. Their custodial bank is U.S. Bank, current custody of the the pension OPEB trust with PFM is under principal, and so those funds would be moved from the principal custody account over to the U.S. Bank custody account with this approval process. And the PARS pension does provide several investment strategies, and we have provided draft policies for both the OPEB and the pension investment policies today, and we'd like some firm direction in order to put those on CVWD templates and then bring those back to the board at the next meeting for ratification and approval. So with this action today, we are asking for approval to establish the combination pension and PARS OPEB trust, and then also to review the investment allocation strategies, again, for adoption at the next meeting. We're planning on potentially making the contributions by mid-June of this fiscal year for the pension trust, no contributions to the OPEB trust. And then, and so those would be the next steps, just trying to wrap it up before the end of the fiscal year. So if we could talk a little bit about the investment strategies themselves, currently the OPEB Trust has what's called a balanced portfolio strategy. And we had proposed and discussed this during the Finance Committee to move it to a more moderate strategy. Couple of reasons for this. The OPEB Trust is 100% funded. And within the actuarial reports, there was a projection that the health rate increases would be about 3.4%. However, staff negotiated those health benefits to be do not have a rate increase for Aetna for 2026 and 2027. And then the Kaiser actually had a reduction in 2025. So we're not anticipating to have those full rate increases for our health benefits, which means the funded status would be even higher with our upcoming actuarial report. And just for a point of reference, we have about 110 employees under the Aetna plan, which again has no rate increases for the next 2 years. And we have about 23 employees under the Kaiser plan, which may have a moderate increase over the next 2 years. Again, we went back and forth. There was no strong feeling one way or the other. It really is up to the board's discretion. The revised policy that is attached does have the proposed OPEB trust at the moderate level. All that would change in the policy would be the percentages to go into the far right column, which would mirror the pension trust recommendation at the balanced level. And the balanced level is what has been in place for the OPEB trust since inception. And we don't have to, you can make comments now as far as which direction you would like to go, or we can do it at the end of the presentation.
I'm just trying to get some clarity here. It looks to me like there's a current OPEB trust with certain percentages on the different asset classes, and the proposed OPEB trust just changes those percentages.
It does.
Okay,
yes. And the investment rate of return would slightly be lower. So under the current strategy, it's about the return is about 6.21%, and the new proposed return would be 5.5%.
Okay, and then you're creating a new pension trust, and that money's coming from where? Just from the OPEB trust? Where's that coming from?
No, they do need to stay segregated and separate. They're for different obligations. One is for health retiree benefits, and the other for pension benefits administered through CalPERS. The contributions for the pension trust would be an initial contribution of $5 million that is proposed with opening that trust. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more.
Okay, yeah, that's all I wonder. Where does that money come from?
We'll certainly go over that. So the recommendation is to contribute $5 million per year. Right now, if we had a goal of funding the pension liability at about 80% funded, we need about $47 million to do that. And again, this is a long-term liability. It's not something that we want to pay overnight. But if we did about $5 million, we could potentially pay that down in 10 years. That's assuming that CalPERS also meets its projected rate of return of 6.8% going forward. They are in the middle of doing what's called an asset liability management cycle, which reviews that discount rate or rate of return for CalPERS, the mortality rates, and a couple of other funding or investment strategies for CalPERS. And we are expecting to see some potential changes in November with that strategy that may impact their future projections and ultimately our contributions to CalPERS directly. Of course, we would love to be 100% funded, just like the OPEB trust, and we may even continue to make contributions past this 10-year mark, or even with the rate of return that we're anticipating under PARS, may be able to meet that 100% funded ratio within that 10-year mark. And to answer your question, Vice President Estrada, the budget currently has about $7 million allocated for this additional pension trust contribution. However, staff is recommending a $5,500,000 contribution, which would have actually a savings of about $2 million for this year's budget. And again, no contribution to the OPEB trust. And the allocations are based on how payroll is distributed each fiscal year. And these are the allocations for this particular fiscal year. Next year's are slightly different. So each year we would take a look at this. And what we would recommend, or what I would recommend, is that as we go forward and we issue our financial statements, they're done by December. We'd bring them to the board in January. And during that time in January, we would take a look at our reserve balances. It's also the time when we started discussions with the budget, and then give you a firm recommendation. The budget going forward does include another $5 million contribution for next fiscal year. We would try to keep putting those contributions in there for that 10-year period. However, the board every year can decide not to make a contribution, to make a lower contribution, such as we're doing, proposing this or recommending for this year, or even make a larger contribution. If reserves are strong and the board decides that they want to potentially utilize some of those reserves in the future, you could decide, as the board has in the past, with the OPEB trust, to make a one-time stronger contribution at any point in time. So you're not, no handcuffs there, and also no requirement to have any contribution at any point in time to have the pension trust open.
So Carla, this is Peter. As an example of the reduced recommendation from 7 million to 5 million, what are the factors that have gone into that recommendation?
A lot of it had to do with the strain, mostly on our domestic fund. We, as you know, have lots of pressures within that domestic fund and are trying to alleviate any rate increases going forward for domestic.
Okay,
this is part of that strategy.
Yeah, that's a perfect. Thank you.
And even our current funded ratio of 70% is still very good compared to the rest of the California.
There are some agencies that have a lower funded ratio. Absolutely.
Yeah. A lot.
And there are some agencies that are 100% funded. And I actually don't think we should be 100% funded, but the board has, tackled this a number of times, and the 85% funded ratio has been kind of a standard that in the past, and we don't have to stick with the past, but in the past, that 85% has been kind of a benchmark that we wanted to be at. And, I honestly believe that 85% is a good goal, in that we're being responsible in meeting the obligations that we have, but we're not overfunding it to be close to any kind of super funding scenario.
What's the risk that we're trying to mitigate by setting the funding goal? Why is 70 not a good number and 80 is a good number, or 85? What happens if we were to stay at 70?
You would pay more interest on your long-term obligation, essentially.
Okay.
Can you go back to that slide with the rates, the allocation, the green one? There. So during the finance committee meeting, this was presented, and I'm of the opinion that the blue numbers, which is what we're doing now, has been working really well. And I don't think the justification for taking a more conservative approach really makes sense. This is a long-term fund. It's probably perpetual. So we don't necessarily need to liquidate it in the next 3 to 5 years. And for that reason, I just don't see why we would go more conservative. And I would propose we either keep what we have now or maybe mimic what's being proposed for the pension trust, which is, almost what we have right now. It's close.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't see the point of going to that high on fixed income.
And for clarification, President Powell, we would go to, if we kept the same strategy, we would use the pension trust allocation, because the current allocation is under management for PFM, and we would be switching to the PARS with the PFM strategy. Yeah.
Right. So, okay, well, that's fine. And so, I would propose we adopt the right-hand column for both trusts.
I agree with that comment.
And I didn't really hear the consultant arguing with me on that.
Yeah.
It was-
Well,
the idea was, well, we're getting close to being super funded, so why don't we reduce the rate of return? And I'm like, well, why? You know, so if you get super funded, you know, well, that's not a horrible thing. It's not going to cost us more to get there.
Hey, Carla, if we do get super funded, can we withdraw some of that money down to a 100% rate in order to meet the cost of the OPEB liabilities?
Yes, so the last slide I was going to show depicted that. We have drawn down on the OPEB trust for the last 2 fiscal years, and we're estimating to also draw down this year about $900,000. And so we would monitor that, and if the super funded status occurs because our health benefits aren't increasing at the rate we anticipated, or our rate of return is much greater than we anticipated for our trust allocations, then we could increase this distribution or this reimbursement. The current retiree costs are about 1.5 million, and that would be the maximum amount. We could go back 2 years to recuperate some of the prior year cost as well. But yes, good point.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great option.
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. I'm good with
Can I
the
make a
proposal.
motion to?
Go ahead.
I'll move approval, adopting the same allocation on the right-hand column for both trusts.
Okay, there's a motion. I'll second that. Any other comments? Hearing none, can we please have roll call?
And just to clarify, does the motion also include the $5 million proposed contribution and
sounds like
establishing the agreement? Perfect. Thank
there's
you.
a yes to that, and I'll second the yes to that.
And I'm sorry, Carl. So everything that was just moved is part of the recommendation today?
Yes, and we would bring back the official policies because the attached policy for the OPEB trust has the green. Oh, sorry. The green
so that's
column.
What Director Powell's talking about is that was the direction.
The direction,
bring it
so that we
okay.
can bring that
All
back.
right.
Yes,
Thanks.
but we would start the agreement process.
The agreement was started. Yes.
Okay, we have a second motion and a second. I think we understand the direction to match the proposed trust percentages equal to the right-hand column for both. And we're in agreement with the initial contribution. And can we have roll call?
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
Director Nelson.
Aye.
Okay,
Passes 5-0.
Carla, you're up again. Okay. We're moving on to finance item G.
I am texting him right now. I just let him know about 15 minutes ago. We'd almost be ready for him. So one more finance item for you today. This is the amended proposed cost of service study for the Canal Fund. Today with us is Mr. Alan Highstreet, and he's with NBS. Staff has been working with him and Mr. Michael Colantano from Legal Counsel to develop this new proposed cost of service study. Alan will be giving you the presentation today, and staff and Michael are also here to assist with any questions you may have.
Good morning.
Morning, Alan.
So we want to go over the canal water rate study, and we want to essentially answer questions. I'm going to be pretty brief in my presentation because I figure you guys will have a lot more questions as we go forward. So what I do want to just talk a little bit about the rate study objectives and a little bit of background as we move forward. Then we'll briefly touch on the methodology that is used in these types of water rate studies. And then we'll discuss the financial plan, essentially the money we're trying to raise from rates. And then we'll show what some of those draft results are. And then we can also talk about next steps. So whenever you do a water rate study, one of the things really you're trying to do is you try to make sure that you're generating enough revenues to keep your canal fund healthy. You want to generate money to cover all your costs. And when we look at costs, the costs we look at are actually kind of your cash needs. So, you might have a big CIP, but the CIP costs could be funded pay as you go, in which case we'd need that amount of money, or it could be funded with debt service or some type of other agreement. And what we're looking for is we're looking for what your actual cash payments need to be in that given year. Okay, so we're not really looking for the whole cost of the house. We're looking to figure out what are the mortgage payments. so we're looking at that. Now, the other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to satisfy the appeals court judgment. And so we'll talk a little bit about what changes we've made in your rate structure to try to meet those needs. And then the other one is to try to have a cost of service methodology that's easily understood. Now, there's a lot of things that go into these rates. And when we go into the cost of service component, there's a lot's going on. So it's a little bit of a challenge to do that, but we've tried to do that in report and break things down into steps so you can see what's happening. And then the other thing is we want to confirm that the cost of service is higher than your current rates. And I know that sounds a little bit funny, but a couple of charts will show what we mean there. So what's different about this rate study? Well, one of the things that we've looked at, especially with the court judgment, is we propose to eliminate the water supply surcharge. And so that instead of having that charge go directly to the Class 2 users, that has now become just part of your purchase water costs that get spread to everybody. We also propose to combine the Quagga mussel surcharge into the irrigation water commodity charge. Now, basically, both of those cost components are divided by the amount of water sold, so it didn't really change things there, but it simplifies things a bit. Now, probably the biggest change that we have done in this study looking forward is how we apply non-rate revenue, and we've done that differently in this. Earlier rate studies done for the district use non-rate revenue to lower rates by applying those non-rate revenues to your base costs so that everyone shared in that reduction. People are still, what we do, are still sharing in that, but they're in slightly different proportions by the user class. So if we look at the methodology, most studies follow a three-step process, and the first step, again, is the financial plan. How much do you need to generate from rates? And so you're looking again with the money coming in and out of the district and how you're going to pay for that. And we do this over a 5-year period. That's the period that you can legally set rates for by Prop 218. So we set that for 5 years in the analysis. Once we know how much money we need to generate, we look at the cost of service. And the cost of service looks at what are those costs, how are those costs generated, and what's the relationship those to the users. And so, we've got costs broken down into your base costs. We have customer costs that really be spread over the number of accounts, things like preparing bills, some of your admin. Some of your base water costs are going to be based on the amount of water you sell. We have costs broken out. The district breaks out the costs for Zanjeros and how you do the gate visits. And those costs are allocated based on gate visits, not by the amount of water. So by looking at what these costs are and how we divvy those up, we can come up with how much we need to gain. And from each user class, and we just look at, for each user class, who contributes, how much water is being used in that class, how many accounts are there, and so on. And then the rate design is just trying to figure out the best way to charge the people so that you cover the money that's allocated to them. And so, one of the changes in the rate design, for example, was to put the Quagga mussel cost into the base cost. Okay, so that's a change we made there. Now, if we quickly do an overview of our revenues and expenses, if you look at this chart, and it just has fiscal years in each of the columns, and if you look at the reddish-orange portion, that's how much revenue you generate from your rates. The non-rate revenue is your property taxes, it's investment income, it's your intergovernmental revenues, so that covers some of the payback from the MWD repayment agreements. The reason it's so large in those first three columns, in the first two columns especially, is you had 14 million a year coming in curtailment revenue. And that drops to 7 million in 2027, and then it's gone. So you can kind of see that your non-rate revenue is decreasing. Now the purple line going in there is roughly the expenses that you need to generate. So you can see early on, we've been able to put some money into reserves, and there's a lot of uncertainty going on, so it's prudent to do so. But even as we moved into 26 and forward, we just can't put money into reserves like we have been, okay? And in fact, if you looked at this chart in the last couple of years, if you didn't want to increase your rates anymore, you would need to pull it out some of those reserves. Now I know this is a chart that's almost impossible to read, but this is the detail and the breakdown of the sources of your funds in terms of what we have as rate revenue and what's non-rate revenue. And then we break down our use of the funds into our operating expenses and then non-operating expenses. And what we're looking at, again, is what are our total sources of funds versus our total uses? And do we have a surplus? And if we have a surplus, that's money that can go into reserves. And then from there, what do we generate if we have rate increases? And now I have at the bottom here trying to generate 3% in annual increases in rate revenue. Okay, so that's not across the board to each of the user classes. That's how much of that revenue line we're trying to generate. So that's total. So when we saw that chart before in the orange, if we want that to go up 3% a year, that's what we're shooting for. Now I want to talk a little bit about this discretionary funds or this non-rate revenue, because you have discretion on how it's applied. You can use it to offset any operating costs or capital projects. Some agencies use their non-operating revenue to subsidize low-income programs. Okay, it can be used for reserves or debt reduction or any special program that you deemed was in the best interest of the district. Just has to be used in a way that benefits the water system and its customers. Okay. So if we get to the rates, if you look at the columns here, so we have the class on the left, and then we have the current rates, and then the current rates with the Quagga mussel surcharge added on, and then we have the proposed rates moving forward for the 5 years. And you can see for each of the classes how those move forward. So we'd go from agricultural class 1 from 3854, again with the 2 added in with the Quagga mussel, to 4014, and then having that march forward. For the class 2, you'd actually see a reduction from the 10634 to 8757 and having that march forward as well. And industrial construction water would be 55 going to 65. So you can see how that's going on. And the reason we were able to do this is we applied a little more of the non-rate revenue to class 1. Okay, and so they used, close to 78% of the water or so, and we applied like 85% of the non-rate revenues to them. So it's how we apply the non-rate revenues. And then for your other charges, those are shown down below. You can see the OASIS surcharge, and for the most part, that's by agreement. But then you do have the gate orders there, and you can see that the gate orders have gone up from 29.60 to 35.20, and then the unscheduled from 59 to 70, and then the outside ID surcharge that has gone up, and that'll increase slightly as we go through. So that's kind of how the rates turned out to be. So for the next steps, you need to accept the report. You'd authorize staff to move forward and start the 218 process. And then if the protest vote fails, the board can enact those proposed rate increases or any rates at or below the proposed rates in the Prop 218 notice. So again, and you can do that if by applying some of those reserves. I mean, you do have some of those reserves, but that's, again, a financial decision the board would have to make because there are a lot of uncertainties moving forward with the canal fund. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
I just one clarifying question on when at the beginning of the presentation when you talked about one of the big things was the removal of the water supply surcharge.
Yes.
Is that the IWAA?
No.
The water supply surcharge was how we broke the QSA costs out and applied those costs only to the Class 2 account. What Alan is proposing to do here is take all of the expenses and develop a rate which is then adjusted based on the use of non-rate revenue.
Okay.
So the QSA, the water supply surcharge is in both classes right now.
There was no consideration of what happens with the IWAA in this?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. I'll go ahead.
Can I? Yeah, sorry. Did you have one more thing?
No. Go ahead. I'm gonna look for something here on my computer.
Clarify on the. So you said this 3% revenue increase, but it's not necessarily the same for each class. On Class 1, I just want to be clear. There may be an error somewhere. It's either in a previous presentation or it's in the current one. You say the current rate with Quagga for Class 1 is $38.54, which would be $34.32 plus the Quagga charge, right?
Correct.
I don't know what the current Quagga charge is. I can't look it up, but I had it on a previous presentation that it was $3.63.
Yeah, and that was from the year before. So that the previous presentation I gave you was incorrect on that. That had been corrected in this one.
Okay. So the current Quagga is
422.
422. Okay, good. All right. So then that chart, I know you don't have percentages on there, but by my calculation, you go from 38.54 to 40.14. That's 4.15%. Pretty sure that's right.
Yeah. No. In fact, if you look at all of the rates, some of those are increasing more than 3%, right? So the 3% is terms the total amount of revenue we want to collect from rates. And
yeah, I get it. So
yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure I have that number correct because I had picked up a bad number earlier. So
one of the things in the details, it's a little different too, is the percent, the non-rate revenue was applied and looked at each year, so it's not the same percent each year. So that would be in the details of the report. In fact, to find that in the details of the report, you got to go to the appendix tables that break down the calculations for each year.
Right. Okay. So just a comment on this, and I've been following this along the whole time, but so that water supply surcharge, which was essentially the QSA cost, is now included in the irrigation water commodity charge and applied equally to all classes of customers.
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean that's a big change. Okay. All right. Just wanted to make that comment.
I'm trying to pull up the presentation from the last time that we saw it, and I'm having a hard time, but is the are the water usage charges that you're showing for 25, 26 the same that we saw last time?
So the difference here is from the session 2 weeks ago is we put the quagga mussel together into the irrigation water commodity charge. So that's different.
Okay. Yeah, that was a big conversation that we had at that time, because with when you show you're not showing it here, but when you show the quagga mussel, I think you were charging it per acre foot.
Yeah, quagga mussels is charged per acre foot. That's correct.
Yeah, and so you were showing it when it was a standalone line item. You were showing it.
Right.
I don't have it in front of me, but you were showing it at $5 or something an acre foot.
It was so we started. Yeah, so it'd be 420, and then it will be what it was increasing each year. That's correct.
The idea was that if since it's charged out the exact same way, there was no necessity to break it out. It's just a component. Although I do think it's probably a good idea for the board to continue monitoring it as a driver of the rate, because it has gone up quite a bit.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if it was per acre foot, then no matter how it's used in class 1 or class 2, you're still generating this same amount of revenue, right?
Yeah, it won't change. But I mean, it was separate because it was new. I don't even know what year that was. It was a long time ago, and it's not new anymore. So it was just like, why don't we just put it in the rate?
So when it was out of the rate, the numbers for 25, 26 for class 1, class 2 industrial, they were different?
Well, it would have.
Yes.
It would have still been charged equally to everybody. It's just a volumetric charge.
Separated.
Correct. So if we took the percentages based on water usage, like you said, class 1 is like 78%, and you applied the whatever acre foot associated to that for quagga, it would have driven it to 40, and it would have driven the other one to 87.
Yeah. So those costs were. So if you go into the details of the report, these pieces are done incrementally and then added together. I can't recall off the top exactly what figure those are, but yeah. So I showed them individually so you could see what the components were. Again, we're trying to make this so it's understandable. And so you can see, and what makes it a little harder to follow, and I acknowledge that year to year, is that again, we've applied the non-rate revenue disproportionately. Now it's not crazy adjusted, but it is there, and it's applied annually. And so again, it's shown in the appendix for each year. But that's also why you have 40 tables in the appendix.
Okay, so under this proposal, where you've now eliminated the Quagga Muscle charge and you're gonna embed it into the rate, how do we account for the true up of that number, right?
So
into each class.
So when we look at the amount of revenue that's for the cost of service in each class, we took the base costs, we divided that by the water use in each class. And by the way, that changes in the out years going forward because it's anticipated that class 2 sales will increase. And so those changes, those percentages change a little bit going forward in the out years. And then we looked at the account charges, and those were allocated to each of the customer classes based on the number of accounts. And so that's another piece of revenue that we needed to generate. And then the Quagga Muscle costs were just spread out again by acre feet. And so the amount of water use by class 1, class 2 was just, again, allocated proportion. So then we took what was proportioned of the base, what we added because of the account charge, and then of the Quagga Muscle, and then divided that through, came up with the cost, but then also applied non-rate revenue and subtracted the amount of total costs that we needed to recover. Okay, so
Sure.
that's
So
the
we,
math.
all right. So I have two just straightforward questions, two general questions. One was, since we last had the meeting, we I think agreed on the percentage of the non-rate revenue that we were gonna use for class 1 and class 2, and I think we left that room with some type of agreement. Did that change?
Yes, it probably changed within 1% or 2%, and then it would have changed in subsequent years as well.
Okay, and then the next question is, when we try to embed the Quagga Muscle into class 1, class 2 without necessarily tying it to the bill, are we making an assumption, or how do we true up that number to then change whatever the portion of the Quagga cost component is for each of the classes? Because it seems to me that I mean, are we going to try to reallocate the percentages of the Quagga cost to class 1, class 2 moving forward every year, or is it embedded in there?
So
because the
Quagga-
difference in my mind is that if you actually show it as a component of the acre foot that you're using, then it's going to match.
Yeah.
It's going to match, right? Every time you get a bill, it's going to match, versus this assumption that there's a percentage that's being allocated to a class. And so
Yeah, so again, it's by acre feet. So we looked at the acre feet, and there's a table in there that has our assumptions on what the water use is. And so as class 2 water use increases in future years, they will have a higher percentage of the Quagga Muscle costs.
And that's as a result of the water use, not as a result of a disproportionate allocation of that revenue.
Yeah, so that part again. So what we're looking at when we take our costs, we take our base costs, which are allocated by acre feet. We spread that out to each of the class based on water use. We then take the customer costs, which are allocated by accounts, and then proportion that to each of the customer classes by the number of accounts. And that's a lot different ratio than the water, by the way.
Yeah.
And then Quagga Muscle again is proportioned by the water use in that fiscal year. So we add those costs up, and then we apply non-rate revenue to come up with our final rate that's shown in the summary rate table.
So the Quagga charge is being is just based on acre feet used. It's not somehow allocated out by customer class, correct?
It's based on acre foot used, but I use the acre feet to allocate the requirements for each class.
Okay.
I'm assuming you started with the cost of Quagga for like 2024 and some assumption of class 1 use and class 2 water use, and then you divvied up that cost over the proportionate amount for each.
So we actually, in the report, when we look at the financial plan, we are estimating what our costs are for the next 5 years. And so all those costs have been really followed the district's budget process and using some of the same escalators that are shown in the budget process. And then they're allocated. But again, each year for the water use has changed, right? And so it's reapportioned each year based on that water use. Did that answer your question?
I'm just wondering if it's easier to just show it on the bill, and that way it's always what it is on the bill, and and then you don't have to try to true it up every year during the rate process. What was the driver to? I mean, what was the driver to bake it into the base rate?
Tried to simplify the rates. Just one less thing.
Castle, I don't think that there's a true up on it. There's no. It's part of the commodity charge, just like anything else in there.
Well,
yeah, it's kind of a base cost component. It just, we're separating it out here because it's kind of the first year that we're making the change, that the change is being made. So it's really more of the base cost than if you think of it that way.
It is the base cost.
Yeah. So if you had, for example, equipment you could put a line instead of the Quagga surcharge, you could put equipment surcharge. If you pulled that out, it's pretty much baking that cost back into the base cost and including it into the base rate that's being charged to all of the classes.
My argument would be whether it's broken out or not, it has no impact. It just simplifies the bill presentation.
I'm not convinced at this point that it isn't doing something different.
Well, for every acre foot of water that goes through the system, it has to be treated for Quagga. That treatment cost is the same for every acre foot that goes through. There's no reason, actually, to call it out separately. We don't call any other subcomponents of the rate out. So there's really no reason to call the Quagga out separately. It started because it was new to the system, and I believe it started prior to my arrival here. So it's been going on for 15 years. There's no continuing reason to show it. And what we're trying to do is minimize the opportunity for, I don't want to say mischief, but there's no reason to call it out separately anymore. It's part of every acre foot that is delivered.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's just without having the other numbers in front of me and seeing how those percentages then increase the rate for class 1, class 2, because it sounds like those increased based on how the amount of water landed in class 2 versus class 1, right? Like I don't have the information in front of me.
What information would you like?
I was looking for the last
Sylvia
schedule.
just sent it to you, I think.
She sent me a link that I couldn't open. So if you sent me the PDF, okay.
Really, the amount of water in each class is not relevant to this.
No.
Because it's a base charge. It's charged the same to both classes.
Yeah. that makes sense to me. I don't know how the rates are changing to be able to do the calc
How they're changing from what?
from whatever we saw 2 weeks ago.
Well, there were a number of proposals that we saw
Well,
2
yeah,
weeks ago.
I heard about them, but I'm trying to look at the rates.
Can I ask another question while you're looking?
Go ahead.
Going on to, this is one that's different and maybe does require a true up. This account charge, I hadn't taken much of a look at it, but essentially what we're saying is there's 1,351 accounts and there's almost 1.9 million of costs associated with the account charge, right? So this is the billing department, I guess, signing up new customers, that sort of thing. Are we really spending almost $2 million in that department? It seems like a high number.
Did you get this right? This is it. This is the presentation for the 22nd.
Yeah,
Here's the clock.
that's pretty consistent with what has been shown in the past as well. And a lot of those costs are broken out, so you can see what personnel costs are for some of that as well. So
Where are those broken out?
I mean, this doesn't mean that we have to adopt these rates. So this is just, you know, to send this out to the public to say that this is where this is the max we're gonna be in the next 5 years.
So this is the document that we're required
Correct.
To
On
do
everything.
every 10 years if we provide service to another public agency. But it is used as the defense for the board on what the rates will be.
Correct.
You start adjusting the rates from what the proposal is, and that's where we get into trouble.
Jim, don't tell me that, Jim. That's not true. I mean, we show domestic rates all the time that are high, and we change the domestic.
But
we don't
typically,
adopt those.
for
That's
the first year after the
correct
cost
After
of
the
service
first
study
year.
is done,
That's correct.
we adopt the rates in the cost of service study.
That's correct. The first year, correct.
Correct.
Yes. Yes.
What I'm trying to avoid is a much larger discussion when we come to set the rates for Canal, which begins to dissect this analysis.
Yes, you're right on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would actually agree with Jim on that one for the first year. I think that,
yes,
you know, the study is pretty thorough and it's current. So to deviate from it we'd have to have a really good reason.
Be ill-advised.
Ill-advised, yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, but as we move on, I mean, just like the report says, the draft report says, there are a lot of things that change over the years, and projections are just that, they're estimates. And so as those costs come in different, as they come in, that we have an ability to have discretion to adapt to that, and to Anthony's point is that then we can, if it looks like we're building up too much reserves, we can lower, you know, we don't have to go up to that maximum rate allowable.
Exactly. That's all I intended to say.
I mean, typically what's happened in the past is that we don't spend on the capital side, and so we have leftover funds that allow a lower rate increase or maybe no rate increase.
Exactly.
So the proposed rates now are going to include the Quagga. So the Quagga will not be a separate line item.
that's correct.
Okay.
It really has no effect. It's just how much ink we use to print a bill, because you end up paying the exact same thing.
Correct.
So, I heard you talk a little bit about the account charge.
Yes.
What are you
Right.
doing with that?
Well, that's the one it's applied not as a commodity charge, right? It's embedded into the.
It's charged by number of accounts.
It's I didn't use the right word, but it's not part of the It's proportionate to how many accounts are in each class, is what it is. And so it's almost $1.9 million, and you just figure out the total number of accounts and come up with the rate, and then that amount goes into the goes into the, how does it go? It goes into the commodity charge, right?
So basically, in your irrigation water commodity charge, you have the base charge, which is allocated based on acre feet. You have the account charge, which is divided by the number of accounts. And because class one has a lot more accounts, they pick up a lot more of the customer costs. And then you have the quagga mussel costs, which are again allocated by the water use again. Those dollar amounts, we apply essentially the non-rate revenue to and lower the amount of revenue we need to collect. But if you look at the customer costs, class one pays a lot bigger share of those costs.
Right, yeah, but I understand, yeah, it's by account.
Right. I mean, one of the things that the initial proposal had was a monthly fixed charge by account. And one of the things that we will probably need to do if we ever want to do something like that, which is what we do in domestic and sanitation, we have a monthly service charge, is we'd have to go out and reconcile how we would apply that, whether we would apply it by account or by meter. That's just, we need to do a little more brain work there on whether or not that there's value in doing that and then actually figure it out.
Yeah, I get it. Okay. I'm all right with it.
Yeah, I'm not all right with it. I don't know. I would propose that we bring it back. I have some more questions. I don't want to get too much into a debate here unless we want to do that. But the kind of the thing that comes out at me is that I think I heard you say that class one has the biggest proportion of water use, and you've also said that class one has the more accounts, and so those are the numbers that you're trying to put into the base rate, and it just seems to me from looking at this that we saw 2 weeks ago, that the way the proposed increases now, which I think, are we looking, what table is it? Is it 2025, 26, the top table or the bottom table? What's the top table? It just seems to me that the way those rates have changed now aren't necessarily kind of following that line of thinking for me. So,
well, it was based on a discussion that we had with the board. And so there were changes. That particular approach is not what the board wanted. And based on the discussions we had, this is the result.
I think I was at that meeting, and I don't recall that we had agreed on this.
Well, you hadn't agreed on these exact numbers, but you told him to go back and make adjustments that these numbers now reflect. Unless I'm wrong. I mean, I don't mean to speak for the board.
I don't recall that. I recall that we kind of agreed a little bit on the way we're going to use the non-rate revenue.
Is that the problem? You don't see how the non-rate revenue is being used? You're not. No, it's not really the rates themselves. It's.
I don't see what you're seeing, which is different. I think the only thing that's different is that he didn't, when we talked before, he didn't add the quagga mussel and the base rate in together. It was separated, and here we're just having it.
Let me see.
Together.
I'm gonna shoot this at you, and then you guys try to convince me. But it looks to me like
I think we got 4 votes.
It looks to me like at the last last time we saw this, there was a proposed rate of 36 with 19 cents for class one, a proposed rate of 65 with 68 cents for class two, and the way those have changed now is class one goes to 40, and class two goes to 87, and I just don't see how those rates change proportionally that way. When you're saying that the bulk of the quagga mussel and the bulk of the account charge per account was substantially higher in class 1. So bring it back.
And Alan, can you respond to that? I don't have the prior
Well,
stuff in front of me.
that's what I was trying to look at, John.
So I think to get to the basis of Vice President Estrada's concern, I believe he is concerned about the increase in the Class 2 from the previous recommendation to the current recommendation. That it went from 70, again, depends on what line you're looking at, but I think one of the lines had it at 65.68, and now it's at 87.57. And I think it really has to do with the guidance that was given to the consultant in our previous discussion and how to allocate the different costs of service, and then how the non-rate revenue is applied. I think.
And in those numbers, since I don't have them in front of me, was that also numbers with an account charge?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
they don't include the account charge,
Yeah.
nor do they include the Quagga charge. So it's apples and broccoli.
If this is any help, how I would try to swallow this and move on is the kind of the all-in rate, and we're not looking at gate charges.
No.
That's another increase that class 1 pays, the other guys typically don't pay, or they don't pay much of it. But you're looking at a 4.15% increase for class 1. And you're looking at a significant decrease for class 2 compared to current rates, right?
Correct.
Right.
Class 2, well, I don't know what the all-in rate for class 2 is, but it's over 100, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like 100. What doesn't it show on the chart here?
Is that it? 106? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going from 106.34 down to 87.57. So in the one hand, you have this modest increase. On the other hand, you have a large decrease. I don't know what that is, maybe almost 20%. I'm not sure what, to me, this might be the only rate decrease we've ever done since I've been on this board. And it's a pretty big one. But I bet I'm all right with it. It's fine. But
So Carla just brought it up to me. It was, it's a little less than 18% decrease.
right.
All right.
What's happening?
I'd just say that in the future, let's try to have these debates in closed session if that's the intent of what we need to do. Because that's why we have those, and I thought that that's what we had done, so. I don't have any other comments.
Mr. Vice President, if there are no other comments, then I would, on this item, I would move to receive and file the cost of service study for the Canal Water Fund. And I would also move to authorize the preparation and mailing of Prop 218 notices for the proposed canal rate increase for fiscal years 2026 through 2030.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion, there's a second. Any other comments?
No? Okay. President Powell?
Aye.
Vice President Estrada?
Yes.
Director Bianco?
Aye.
Director Aguilar?
Aye.
And Director Nelson?
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0.
Okay, moving
thank
on.
you. Thank you, sir.
Let's see.
One more.
All All right, operations, Olivia.
Good morning, Olivia Bennett, Non-Potable Water Program Manager. Bringing before you an agreement requesting approval and authorization for the General Manager to execute the agreement for initiation and continuation of domestic water service for the model homes and compliance with non-potable water service requirements. This is not a normal non-potable agreement. It's something that we came across with Cotino. Background with Cotino is a new development in Rancho Mirage that they wanted to use non-potable water in the front and backyards, causing it to be a dual plumbed use for recycled water, and that requires additional regulations for how they use the water. So part of those regulations are already included in Title 22, Title 17, which is now the Cross Connection Control Policy Handbook, our development design manuals, the recycled water general permit. It's in our recycled water ordinance, CVWD's recycled water ordinance, and in our non-potable water agreement with Cotino. And part of the background is that the requirements require that CVWD perform a plan check. We received the plans from Cotino. We went to the site to verify that what was presented in the plans is what was happening in the field, and we found that it was not. So what they had was domestic water pipes and recycled water pipes in the same trench. So they weren't abiding by the separation distance that's required. They were using the same material pipes, which we had asked for different materials. The domestic water line, if they could not meet the separation distance, was to be sleeved, and that was not happening there either. They're supposed to keep a 3-foot minimum separation from plantings and the pool or a spa, and that wasn't happening either. So we met with the developers and Cotino themselves, and we decided you can either correct it now or you can correct it before it transfers ownership to the buyer. And so what they wanted to do is later, of course, because it would interfere with their business going forward to show the model homes. They'd have to tear up all the hardscape where the pipes were underneath. So that's what this agreement is determining. It only applies to 6 of the model homes that are out there. It doesn't apply to anything that was constructed model home-wise after January 1st. And if that doesn't happen, then CVWD has the right to terminate domestic water service and will require the mutual water company to terminate the non-potable water service on their side to the residential homes.
So somebody screwed up.
So that could be 10, 15, 20 years into the future.
Could be. The term of this agreement is auto renewal for every 5 years until it's satisfied.
Right. I guess we're pretty good now at tracking things, so we're gonna have to keep an eye on that for 20 years, you know.
Well, I mean, the reason why we have that is because we have recycled water there, and we don't want somebody to, you know, in the future have cross connect on accident.
Exactly.
On accident, and then the recycled water goes into their house and they drink it, or
exactly.
I mean, this is a big thing.
The separation distance is 10 feet, and they don't have the room, so it might be smaller than 10 feet, but it certainly can't go in the same trench. And if it is with less than the required separation distance, then the domestic water line is to be sleeved. We also require them to have different materials so that there's no confusion by the homeowner or by their plumber, whoever that cuts into the pipe. They're using their HDPE for their domestic line and then PVC for their recycled water line.
Different materials and color is probably the biggest thing.
Indicators.
Because, you know, in the future, you dig up and you see white PVC, you don't know what it is. You just know it's water, right?
Shouldn't be any more white out there.
The only question I have.
Sorry, very kind of CVWD to give them 20 years to fix their problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's up to you.
Yeah, I don't like it. I mean, I think that their motivation to use non-potable water is fantastic. They signed a contract and an agreement to use it, and now right out of the gate they're violating the agreement. I just and this is
Well,
this is what we struggle with.
I will defend them for this 1 second. The model homes were already being constructed while we were negotiating the non-potable water agreement. I mean, they could have referred to Title 22, our development design manual, and Title 17, but instead they allowed them to continue to build. So they were on the way of being done when we finalized our agreement in September.
Why don't we tie it to where they can't sell those model homes?
That is.
Oh, that is part of it. Okay.
Can't transfer ownership.
Olivia,
Are you going to record something on the title of the property so that it comes up when they go to sell the house?
This agreement is to be transferred to the potential buyer.
So it's going to be recorded on the title?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we had set it up to be recorded on title. We can certainly look into that as well. I mean, it is explained in here that it's, binding and it follows the land. So I'm not sure what technically.
Well, I understand that. Yeah, I mean, I think to protect the future buyer, we should require that it's recorded.
What's supposed to be?
And it's probably they're probably separate lots. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all separate lots. So basically what happened is while we were working on solidifying the plan check process and them getting into a rhythm, they were building the model homes. And in an effort to get ahead of them, of the purchases, I guess you could say, they put in the wrong materials while we were still getting into this rhythm. So we stopped them immediately. We developed something that we thought would be strategic, meaning, hey, you can continue on and doing homes, and you just won't be able to sell these 5 or 6 model homes.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Another idea, I mean, this wouldn't be out of the question, is to ask to post a bond and record it on the title.
Yeah.
So that we know there's somebody financially responsible at the end of the day who can do this. I mean, what if they go bankrupt and then they get sold?
I mean, we have the authority on the hook. We have the developers on the hook. We have the potential HOA on the hook.
Mutual Water Company.
So I feel comfortable that, and we provide them 2 different services. So I feel that quite confident that we have the ability not to. They're trying to sell 100 homes this year, and they're building in an immense amount. So I don't think it's going to be 20 years. I think once they get into a rhythm, it'll be quicker than that. But I see your concern for sure as far as, 100% safety for the homeowner.
And it's also clear in here
we don't sign off on before they get issued a certificate of occupancy? We don't have a sign off on?
I can't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was asking if we didn't have a sign off on their certificate of occupancy.
We don't even, so let's put it
Not
this.
for residential.
Yeah, not for residential, but we have the ability not to provide domestic water and or reclaimed water if that is the case. So we still have a huge hammer in the long run. We were just trying to, we were struggling with the development to get on the same page. They got ahead of themselves. We were just trying to say, hey, the model homes are always the last ones sold anyway in the whole development. They were already built. The pipelines were already in place. They had contracts under escrow that we're trying to close, and we were just trying to expedite and facilitate a process in the best interest of the business of the development and the valley. So that's what we were trying to accomplish. I realized that, it's not perfect where we don't, it's not, I mean.
Does the city require that there's a meter installed and open and activated before they issue a certificate of occupancy?
Yes.
So then that's where you would just hold it up.
Well, we have the hammer anyway. We don't have to provide them service and either in either case.
Yeah,
whether it be reclaimed.
that's fine. It's a good argument. I still think it needs to be recorded.
Yeah, I agree with John. I think, I mean, actually, the recording and bonding, if you could get both, would be even ideal, but you may not get that. But my other question I had was, in the agreement, it mentions this other water agency that they form. So I don't think I've seen that before. Can you explain that to me? And
That is something unique to Cotino. They decided they were going to have their own mutual water company that would send out the bills internally to their residences because they are responsible for the meters, the non-potable water meters for each residence. We're only responsible up to our point of connection on Frank Sinatra. After that,
So when we shut off the water for those 5 homes, we're going to shut off the entire community.
That's a different. There's a difference between Olivia's talking about the non-potable. The domestic is still ours.
Domestic is ours. Okay.
Yes.
yeah, so we deliver to a reservoir there, and then they pump it throughout their system.
but just for the non-potable
Just the
component?
non-potable, and then, but we can require the mutual water company to terminate service, non-potable water
Okay.
service to any property.
Okay,
We
I
have
think it's
that.
weird. I'd never seen it before.
We have, oh yeah,
They're getting just
completely
one big
different.
bill for the
Non-potable.
That's-
for non-potable water that goes to their, and then
Then they distribute.
they distribute.
And then they charge their residents internally
I see.
for
Okay,
that.
great.
Yeah,
And-
we've never done this direct drag water.
We
It's
haven't,
kind of
yeah.
all new, the new process moving forward.
But we have the
potentially.
right to terminate non-potable water service even throughout the use of the recycled water when there is a potential cross-connection that we find. And we have to go back every year to test every site.
Okay.
Well, and we have the right to terminate all service to these model homes if we find out that they're not complying with this agreement. So
Right.
we can hold up the sale, they're informed the escrow officer, and we can stop all service to these model homes if they are sold without complying with these requirements.
Yeah, I just don't know that putting it on the deed is the right way to do it because I think these homes, these properties are retained by the developer, and one of the conditions is that they fix the problem before it's sold. So
Right.
I don't know that having it on the title is the right way because it's supposed to be gone. It's supposed to be fixed by the time the title is given to
Transferred.
the new property owner. There is no
Well,
title.
the point of it is that if it's not fixed, that's one way for the buyer to find out about it. That's my point.
Yeah, I just don't know that there's actually a title as it remains in the developer's control.
Yeah, you could record a memorandum of the agreement.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think, right? I mean, that's not hard to do.
I don't want to promise anything, but we will record what can be recorded based on the status of these homes and who owns them. We will pursue recording, and I just don't want to guarantee that we can record on these individual lots right now or these individual homes right now, a recordable document or a memorandum of this agreement or whatever. But we will pursue what can be recorded, and we will record it.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah, I think that's a good solution. Olivia, so they're selling homes for 20 years. They have these homes there as models for the next 20 years before they sell it. And, trends change. They want to change up some things in their model homes. And so they have gardeners out there that do some kind of unknowing cross connection, and now they're serving water to potential buyers out of the model home. Whose liability is that? Is that the district's liability, or is that the developer?
Anytime there's a change in the landscape plans, they're to submit a plan check, and then we'll go out and do another inspection. If they're going to be making changes, then they're going to have to abide by the plan check that's submitted.
So we anticipate.
We have to go out every year. From this point on, we'll be going out every single year to verify that what's happening hasn't changed.
I think Director Nelson's questions is specific to the 6 model homes, and I think the answer is everything's domestic at this point in time.
Yeah, they don't have
So there's
any-
no risk until we build these pipelines that in the future when just before they try to sell them. There is no non-potable water. They actually installed everything that is domestic water.
Yeah. It's right now they're not planned to get non-potable water service until 2026.
So we anticipated this by putting in the contract that any other non-compliance with anything else will not apply to this agreement. So if somebody else goes out there and does something else bad, wrong, inappropriate, this agreement doesn't cover that. That's direct enforcement right away.
Well, that doesn't sound like that much risk then. If it's already, it's all potable. All potable.
Yeah, then there's no.
I mean, why did they even do the agreement? Why did they just say fine for those 6 homes? We'll just leave them on the domestic system.
We don't want that.
They wanted non-potable. They're going to use non-potable.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I have one more thing. And if you do recall, our One Cross connection a couple years ago was a direct result of a model home. So we're trying to be very cautious in this stance. So it was in Mission Hills. So that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. And it, again, completely new process. We've never had a backflow on every home. It was their request. We're trying to use conservation. And this was the best solution we could have to keep the economy going and keep them moving forward. And we feel like we have the hammer on the back end to make sure that they won't be sold. So.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I'll move approval of this item with the request that we record something on the title of these 6 homes.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Can we please have roll call?
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Passes
Thank you.
Okay,
5-0.
thank you. Okay, moving on to informational items and reports. We have written communication. I think the board has a copy of that. We don't need to spend time on that, do we?
Nope.
Okay,
unless
so
there's
then we'll move on to a presentation by Carrie Oliphant, the Director of Engineering. She's going to present on compliance plan for Chromium 6.
Carrie, is there anyone online that I need to move over?
Yes, actually, Rachel from West Yost is going to present this item, but I am happy to answer any questions that come up. But I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Lanigan from West Yost.
Hi, Rachel. I'm promoting you to a panelist so you can make the presentation. If you go ahead and accept that, and then you'll be able to speak.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, okay. Good morning, board members. Here I will turn my video on as well. Okay. Good morning. Nice to be here today. Thank you for your attention. I know you've had a long agenda on the agenda today, long meeting so far. My name is Rachel Lanigan. I'm a water resources engineer with West Yost, and this presentation will provide an update on the evaluations and recommended plan to comply with the state's new hexavalent chromium requirements. So I know, I'll try to keep this pretty brief, but feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. I think we can keep going.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So,
All right,
hold on, Rachel, if you'd like, we're running the PowerPoint for you, so just let us know. Next slide, and staff will go ahead and move that forward for you.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
I'll do that. Thank you. All right, on our agenda, we'll be brief today, but we're going to review again the state requirements, look at the Chromium 6 compliance plan process and some of the goals and assumptions. Then we'll look at an overview of the alternatives and selection of the recommended alternative, and then give you a few of the next steps. Okay, next slide. So as you probably already know, the hexavalent chromium state requirements have been instated to have a maximum contaminant level of less than 10 micrograms per liter. The effective date of the new MCL was October 1st of last year. And the district has 2 years to comply with that for the Cove system, 3 years to comply with that for the ID8 or Desert Hot Springs system, both of which are a bit aggressive considering the significant impacts this requirement has on the district. As you probably know, around 50% of your wells, or 34 of the wells, are impacted and have chromium 6 levels above the MCL. Next slide. So the overall process we've just gone through, our team at West Yost, in combination with the engineering and operations team, have spent the last year and a half, even longer than that really, reviewing treatment technologies and non-treatment options, evaluating the alternatives based on both cost and non-cost criteria, and ultimately leading to selecting the compliance plan alternative. Next slide. So the overall goals, and this pertains particularly to the domestic water system, the goals are to either treat or turn off wells with hexavalent chromium levels above 10.4 micrograms per liter. That just allows us to round down to the 10 MCL. And ultimately the goal is to minimize disruptions to customers. That includes minimizing pressure changes, minimize changes to the operations of the pumps and the tanks, and if possible improve where that's a possibility. And then lastly, really provide enough supply to meet your highest demands during the year, your peak day demand, plus an additional 30%. And that supply redundancy is really needed to accommodate other supply disruptions you may have, like wells that may be turned off or have other issues. So there's the overall goals, and we evaluated all the alternatives to meet these goals. Next slide. And then for each of the alternatives, we identified all the infrastructure needed for them and developed capital costs, both upfront capital costs and a 20-year net present value to consider how those costs how you'll be impacted by those alternatives over time. The capital costs are at a fairly high level of definition still, so those are subject to change. We've included lots of standard contingencies and try to, do our best with both your staff experience with like recent projects, plus ours as engineers, pulling together example projects to get those as accurate as we can. And then the net present value cost really looked at 20 years of operations and maintenance. Some of these alternatives include treatment plants that have a lot of annual costs, so we wanted to make sure we were getting apples to apples with all of the alternatives. Next slide. We also looked at non-cost evaluation criteria and then gave each of these a weighted percent. The criteria include redundancy, operational complexity, implementation complexity, resilience, long-term water quality, public acceptance, and environmental impact. And while all of these were very important, the staff identified that redundancy, operational complexity, and implementation complexity really needed to have a higher weighting, as they're going to impact the district a lot more in implementing this. I'm happy to talk about that more, but that also weighed in as we evaluated each of the alternatives. All right, next slide. So this is an overview graphic of the domestic water system, kind of separated out by pressure zone. The colored polygons there represent each different pressure zone. The purpose of this graphic is to show that some of the zones have surplus water, like up on the upper left, Rio Vista, Date Palm, Sky Mountain. They have surplus water even after those wells with chromium 6 are turned offline. And there are existing connections that are shown by the arrows to between those zones and other zones that have deficits, like the Valley Zone that's shown that with the 14,000 gallon per minute deficit. And so our alternatives looked at how can we move water around the system using the existing infrastructure and then other infrastructure that we proposed to try to move that water where we've got good quality water in excess into the areas that have a deficit. And so that really informed a lot of the decisions that we made with the alternatives analysis. So let's go to the next slide, please. So just jumping to the chase, we had 4 alternatives with several different iterations among all of them. Going from left to right, we've got alternative A, B, C, and D. The recommended alternative is there on the end, alternative D. Alternative A, just starting here quickly, in the end, this one had 10 different treatment facilities. This one looked at really focusing just on treatment. Alternatives B and C looked at how can we share that water from different zones using different methods. And then ultimately alternative D is the one we landed on, which was a bit of a hybrid, but really made sure each pressure zone was self-reliant. A combination of both clustered treatment facilities and new wells. And I'll show you what some of these look like as we go a little further. So let's go ahead to the next slide. So this is a graphic of the recommended alternative. Again, you can see all of the pressure zones, but here's how they actually connect together. Starting on the upper left in the Desert Hot Springs system, we are recommending a clustered treatment plant, which just means several wells going to one single treatment plant. That is shown with the red pentagon shape there. And that would be treating 4 existing wells up in that area. And then as we move into the system, there's a well rehabilitation in the Mission pressure zone shown by that white circle. In the Valley zone, you'll see several new wells proposed to be drilled, shown as blue dots there. In Sun City, there is another cluster treatment facility that will be treating 2 existing wells plus 2 new wells. There are also 2 recommended cluster treatment facilities in La Quinta, treating existing and new wells in combination. And then you'll see a few red lines that are just graphic depictions of new transmission pipelines that are needed here too. So overall, this alternative includes 4 new treatment facilities, which was actually one of the lower, not very much different than some of the other options, but this overall was the lowest cost option, and we'll get to that in a minute. And it includes 14 new wells. All right, next slide. So there are a lot of benefits to this alternative, largely because we went through the iterations of this and moved a lot of the cons onto the pros side with this alternative. This one did have the lowest capital cost. Well, it is a lot, and we'll get to that. It is the lowest. It really helps distribute and diversify the water supply. It allows each of those pressure zones to be self-reliant. Rather than abandoning some wells, this makes sure you're utilizing your existing wells. Several of the wells still have great production. They just, have the chromium-6, so this helps utilize those with the treatment facilities. The operation of the distribution system remains fairly similar to how it operates today. This maximizes use of well sites that have good quality water in several of the zones that haven't been drilled yet, but you have good well sites already available. And this builds adaptability to future water quality changes. And the cons, the 2 additional treatment facilities, a total of 4. There's 2 more on this alternative than there are on alternatives B and C, which we'll look at in a minute. This is still a pretty efficient way to treat the chromium-6 and the overall problem as a whole. And yes, it will come with some higher O&M costs, but there were so many pros and so many benefits to this, the district felt really confident in this alternative. Let's go to the next slide. We could keep coming back to these. I just did want to get to the overall cost here for you. So here you can see the overall cost came out to $350 million. When we look at the 20-year of net present value, that increases an additional $40 million. So the total net present value was $390 million. And again, these are planning level cost estimates. And while they are very significant, I do understand these are lower than what was originally expected. So I think that is good news. All right, next slide. So this is the first alternative, just a quick review of the other alternatives. Similar graphic here, but this ended up having a total of 10 treatment facilities. All the red pentagon shapes plus all the orange circles were all individual and cluster treatment facilities. So it's going to be a lot more expensive. You can see on the bottom corner there, the capital cost was 410 million. O&M would be much higher with 10 treatment facilities. So the net present value came out to 480 million. Next slide. And this is an overview of both alternatives B and C. And as you can see on the graphics, there's a lot of several transmission pipelines shown in the red. And, you know, those became larger and larger as we were trying to evaluate how to move the water around. So while there are existing connections between these zones, they're not large enough to significantly overcome the deficits that turning off these wells causes. So in the end, the district felt that these pipelines, for one, they would be very challenging to construct, and they also, to both permit and to construct. And they also, you know, require a heavy reliance on wells up in the Date Palm and Rio Vista area. And, you know, that kind of puts all of your eggs in one basket and creates a lot of risk for something going wrong. And then on the tables here next to it, you can see alternatives B and C sort of compared. In the end, their capital costs weren't too much higher than the proposed alternative, and the net present value was around the same, slightly lower than the selected alternative. I'm happy to answer questions on these. Why don't we keep going to the next slide, and then we can come back as needed. So just as an overview to compare the alternatives together, you can see the number, you know, going down on the left, each row here, you can see the number of new treatment facilities, new wells, transmission pipelines, pump stations, etc. And you can see how the capital costs compared and the net present value. And then ultimately we did a cost benefit ratio for each of the alternatives, and alternative D came out with the best ratio. And staff feel really comfortable and confident in this decision. It matches very well with how they operate today. Feel a lot of confidence in this. We did do a bit of a risk analysis to try to ask all the challenging questions, make sure we're thinking long term, and feel really good about this decision. All right, next slide. Our next steps here are to finalize that compliance plan and submit it to the state this summer. And then as part of implementing, there needs to be some bench scale and pilot testing of the selected treatment technology, which is called RCF treatment. That should happen this summer as well. And then ultimately start entering the design phase and implementation of the compliance plan.
Question on that RCF, is there a waste stream from that, and how do we manage that?
There is a waste stream. It has less of the chemicals remaining in it than the other treatment technologies that we looked at. But we did also evaluate downstream impacts of that, both from modeling the sewer capacities nearby, and I believe Carrie and team have talked to the wastewater agencies down there as well. Oh, good. I see Chad's on here too if we have questions related to that in more detail.
Yeah, I can also answer that. We've looked at each of the clustered treatment facilities and the sewer pipelines that are closest, and we've confirmed that there's capacity and that we can accept that backwash, or the backwash water. We've also spoken with Mission Springs Water District, and they're also gave us the initial indication that they would be willing to accept that water with at their new wastewater treatment plant up in Desert Hot Springs.
Okay, so it's not a toxic product. It's not like ion exchange.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And in that waste stream, Carrie, is there chromium-6 in it, or is that the part that's removed and taken out?
I'm gonna let Chad or somebody else answer that specifically, because I don't know.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
glad to speak to that. So the reduction coagulation filtration treatment technology uses ferrous iron to reduce chromium-6 to chromium-3, and those chromium-3 then precipitates with iron particles, and then that is what is filtered. The filter backwash water then contains iron and chromium-3 in a particulate form, and that is what is conveyed to the wastewater system. It is very similar to the commonly utilized coagulation filtration process to remove arsenic from groundwater, which countless water systems across the state, frankly, the country, use for that purpose, just with the difference of chromium being removed instead of arsenic. But the chromium in the removed state is chromium-3, not chromium-6. And so team is addressing the mass balance aspects of how that then gets conveyed to the wastewater and how it ultimately would be a part of the biosolids removed at the wastewater treatment plant, not for discharge from the wastewater plant.
Will chromium-3 revert to chromium-6 at any point in that process?
You know, so we've done some analysis of that. There are some cases where there's limited reoxidation back to chromium-6, although the common sampling results that we see from other water systems that have naturally occurring chromium-6 in their groundwater that's supplied to drinking water and then goes to wastewater is that we don't see any chromium-6 coming out of the wastewater plants, but we see accumulation of total chromium in the existing solids at the wastewater plants. So the biological treatment processes at wastewater plants are commonly already doing similar treatment processes in that way.
Yeah, that's a really important factor for us, I think, because of the fact that we're reusing the water on turf and landscaping, and we don't want to cause a wider problem in terms of adding that chromium-6 back into the whole stream aspect of it, right? I mean, it would take centuries, I'm sure, but still, it's a concern.
Well, and it's important to recognize that, you know, the historical operation of these groundwater wells with chromium-6 concentrations above 10, or even those that are just below 10, that chromium is, as it goes to the potable system, is used and then goes to the wastewater system, is conveyed to the wastewater plant, and has been in that use ever since it began.
Fair enough, yeah.
The delta in the increase of chromium going to the wastewater plant is simply the amount that's removed and then directly routed to the wastewater plant, and doesn't have the opportunity for some portion of it to be used for outdoor irrigation that doesn't return to wastewater.
Right.
So there's a small difference in the mass balance in that regard, but those questions and concerns that you raised are absolutely front of mind of the technical team that's addressing this, and we're working through those aspects with CVWD's specific interests in mind, and having that parallel similar efforts with other communities across the state that are working through the same things right now.
Okay.
So when we build these RCF plants, are there other constituents that can be removed with that process?
Yeah, the most notable is that the RCF process is also able to readily remove arsenic because it's an iron-based coagulant process, similar just to arsenic coagulation process. That's the most notable. So unlike the ion exchange process that can remove some other contaminants, nitrate often referred to in that case, the RCF process is mostly used for chromium and arsenic removal.
Yeah, I think John, yeah, PFAS is more ion exchange or activated carbon.
Correct.
So I have two questions about wells. One is, what is the risk that our new wells won't have chromium-6? And then another second follow-up is, what's been done about isolating certain levels of potential chromium-6 concentrations within a well, and rehabbing or isolating that certain production area of the well to eliminate chromium-6 uptake?
So I can answer that. So for the first question, we have looked at water quality in surrounding wells, whether they're CVWD domestic wells, whether they're monitoring wells, whether they might be data that we have from private wells, to try to site the new wells in areas where we don't believe we're going to encounter high levels of chromium-6. And then with respect to rehabilitation, we were successful at rehabilitating well 4507, which is in our Mission Hills pressure zone, which is in Rancho Mirage, by isolating the lower, or basically backfilling the well, filling it with a gravel pack to screen off the lower portion of the well, the deeper portion. And we were able to go from above 10 to 8 micrograms per liter of chromium-6. We have another well that's screened similarly, that's relatively close in the same pressure zone, Mission Hills, that we're going to be looking at doing the same thing. And so we're constantly looking at the ability to do the rehabilitations versus drilling a new well. It's just some of the older wells were screened shallow, or had more of a mix of screens. They had shallow in the middle. And then when we started having nitrate issues, we went to this idea of screening deep, as you know, trying to get 1,000 to 1,300, and that seems to be where we're finding the chromium-6. So it just depends on the well, and how it's screened, on how successful we are with that effort. But we're definitely looking at it.
So the chromium-6 is deeper?
Tends to be deeper, yes.
Tends to be deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So to 1,000, over past 1,000, have we gone down, tried any at 2,000?
No, we've never drilled a well to 2,000. The deepest we've gone is like 1,300, 1,400. The cost increased significantly after you get beyond like the 1,300. You have to go to a stronger casing material and different things like that, and we just haven't really seen the benefit. So we're just trying to find that the right blend of water that's kind of in this middle range, not too shallow, because that's when we tend to hit the nitrates if we're in a nitrate related area, not too deep. So it's a challenge, but we're definitely, you know, obviously that's a easier way to get a well into service, into compliance, and it's less costly. So that's part of the plan.
I'm just wondering if all of our wells were, you know, if all of the wells in the bad areas were down at 1,300 plus feet, would we just be clean?
Oh no, we're finding it.
Have treatment.
Yeah, we're finding.
No, excuse me, the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, we're finding it at the deeper level.
Yeah,
so I don't.
So you'd have to be at the 3 or 6 or 800.
Yeah.
Carrie, do you foresee that we'll have to notify folks before our compliance date?
Yes, absolutely.
You think that's going to happen by the end of the year, or?
Well, we are submitting our compliance plan this summer, and I believe it's due by October. And then I think we have to start notifications.
Okay, but there's no
sometime.
way around it.
No.
You don't have enough wells to turn off and things like that.
We don't have enough.
I think it's October 2026.
Yeah. But yeah, we won't. I mean, this is just the compliance plan. Now we're going to be coming back to you, hopefully at the next board meeting on May 28th, to get approval to move to jar testing, because we need to do jar testing of the RCF treatment. And then that's going to help inform the bench scale, the pilot testing. And then we're going to be issuing an RFP for design and environmental related to this project. So, you know, designing treatment facilities can be it's not a 3-month process. It could be 6 months to a year. Obviously, we're going to look at trying to get going on the well drilling aspect, though, because that's fairly routine. But we're going to have to address the environmental and how all of that works together.
But everybody's going to have to.
Yeah. Well,
in the state is going to have to let their customers know by
October 2020. Yeah, if they're not in compliance. But a lot of people don't have the same significant problem that we do with the same amount of wells that are going to be impacted. We just can't take 34 wells out of service from our system and still provide a level of service to our customers.
Oh, but you think that you'll be able to take some of them out so that you don't trigger the notice before 2026?
We think certain pressure zones will be in compliance. There's certain pressure zones that, like the upper ones closest to the recharge facilities, that will be in compliance.
Okay. Any other questions? I think this is just informational, so no action, right?
No action. Nope. We just wanted to inform you of where we're at and address any questions or comments before we finalize the compliance plan and then move full scale ahead in terms of the next phase, the design, the environmental, and the pilot testing.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other comments coming up, questions. So thank you, Carrie.
Okay.
Thank you, folks on the screen. We're gonna move on now to. Okay, we're gonna move on now to board comments and requests for future items. Board comments. I'll start with folks online. President Powell.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm at these Western Growers meetings in Washington, D.C. talking to. Well, I missed all the senators today because I'm with you. That's okay. But we had a pre-meeting and the topic of the Commissioner of Reclamation came up. There isn't one. And so there's a fellow, I don't know this person, but maybe Peter or somebody does. Jason Phillips, CEO of Friant Water Authority.
Yep.
Been there for 8 years, and he was with Reclamation prior to that. And there seems to be fairly strong support for him, and our group was going to do some advocacy on his behalf. Don't know what that means or who the other candidates might be, but it would be obviously great if somebody from California who's also knowledgeable and experienced would be a good candidate for that position.
John, were there any other names that came up?
There were not. No, there was apparently somebody from North Dakota that came up for a little while, but got appointed to some other position. But no, that was kind of the question. Who else is there? And I didn't hear any other names.
So, Jason has told his board he's sticking with his Friant Water Authority. And at their last retreat that they have an annual retreat. And he said, I'm all in with the board. I'm not moving. The rumors are around. But that was 3 months ago. And so we still don't have a commissioner. So the pressure will mount for Jason, I'm sure. He is a staunch advocate for reasonable water supplies. He has good, I think, good experience with reclamation, obviously, and he's can be dogmatic in his advocacy, which shouldn't hurt California, especially on Colorado River issues. It might be helpful. So
yeah, good. Well, all right. Well, that's positive. Great. That's all I have.
All right, Director Nelson.
Yeah, I'm just super happy to see a 50% allocation on the State Water Project announced by DWR.
Great.
That's all.
Okay. No comments from Director Aguilar.
I would just say that you know, we have the staff is proposing a new landscape ordinance that I think that the board needs to go through, and so I've asked the district to set a study session up so that we can go through a red line of that ordinance. I understand it's been sent to CVAG and it's been sent to the building association, but I don't believe the building association before those things were being sent to them before us, and I get why, because we've always asked when it's come to us, have they seen it? But I don't think that they're really looking at it. I think they're leaving it up to us. Oh, I know at least CVAG is leaving it up to us. Like, okay, if the board has looked at it and this is what they're saying is good, then we're okay with it. But we really haven't looked at it. So I think we need to go through that collectively as a group before it comes to us for a vote.
Yes, sir.
Thank
I
you,
think.
Anthony, I agree.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about this in-house because of the concern, and I think we'll probably push it till after we get through the budget and rate setting. There's nothing that's driving this right now from a time standpoint.
Okay,
So,
because I thought we were on a deadline for June, but we're just going to push that back.
well, based on everything else that we've got going on, I think we've got to put priorities out for the budget and the rates, and this will come after that.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Yeah, good suggestion. I did get somewhat of a call from CVAG also asking about what's going on with it, what we thought about. So I think you make a good point. That's it for me. Board requests for future agenda items. Well, you just made one, so that sounds like that'll be a study session at some point. And with that, we'll move on to board meetings. First one is Director Bianco, Golf and Water Task Force meeting.
I was on Zoom for the first time, and that was a little more difficult. So I'm going to really try and get there, because we did talk a little bit about the landscape ordinance, which I wasn't aware of. But anyways, they're kind of looking at us too. And then we talked about the mapping projects, and then we went over the last year's monthly readings for the golf course industry.
Yeah, and I was not there, and I think it was primarily because I don't recall, but I thought that's the one where I thought I might have had a conflict with some scheduled Sacramento trip that I didn't end up going to because there was no need for it. But that kind of changed plans for me. But so I'll try to make it at the next one.
Do you mind if I do mine so I can, because I have a...
Go ahead. So you're gonna do the rest of yours.
Yeah, the Living Desert. We elected new directors, which is pretty much the same directors as last time. Bill Apple is going to be the president again. Their biggest new fundraiser is Lions. They want to bring Lions to, but it's going to be their largest, money need that they've ever asked for. So that's their new thing that they'll be working on over the next few years, if not longer. And then with what's the other one? Oh, Energy and Sustainable Committee. Yeah, so there was we had a presentation, very good presentation, to talk about the landscape ordinance, and so that's where I kind of felt there was some confusion that we needed to get involved in, and that was probably one of our. What else did we have there? Oh, Sunline gave us their plans for zero emission fleets and some of their projects coming up, and talked about the Joint Powers Authority, where we have La Quinta and Indio have signed, and Riverside County, And so they're hopeful that Coachella will be coming on board soon.
The city of Coachella?
Yes. They talked about it. They were hopeful.
Regarding the JPA?
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right, so that's it for your
Yeah.
meetings. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And so we'll see you.
No, I'm sorry. So we have to keep a quorum in the room because we have two board
Well,
members.
there goes
of the
that.
conference.
Okay.
Well, that didn't work out.
Nice try.
Nice try. Nice try.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Try.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. So moving on to April 25th. President Powell, you have the next two.
Yeah, I have quite a long report for this one. No, I don't. No, we had our call with the finance staff just to kind of go over some of the thinking on that cost of service study, and then also later that day I had a talk with Buzz about the mediation, Agua Caliente mediation. Yep.
Okay, and so is that for both of them?
Yeah, that's both of them.
All right. The next one, April 28th. Director Aguilar, you have the next two.
Yeah, thank you. So I had a meeting with Jim and with Carrie to hear kind of their perspective on, I think, meetings they've been having with a series of developers regarding upsizing some of the utilities in the Varner corridor. So we discussed those. And at the same time, shortly after that meeting, we met again, the three of us, to discuss, actually with the developer, Newland Capital, who we approved their water assessment on tonight, their infrastructure needs for their project in Desert Hot Springs.
Okay, and then the next two meetings are for, well, no, just the next one. You've reported on the, so this Director Nelson?
Yeah, so April 28th, I did not attend. I was unable to attend the California Farm Water Coalition meeting, so I've taken that off the list. And then on May 9th, I attended a Rancho Mirage Chamber of Commerce breakfast with Senator Ochoa Bo. I, quite frankly, had not, during her election, had not got much information about her or who she was, so it was good to sit down and hear her answer a number of interview questions up in front of the breakfast. Got to hear her story. She's centered on education and housing, so it's all good. Yeah, it was a nice breakfast. That was it.
Okay, thank you. And then we did have a May 7th special board meeting. I believe we were all in attendance. And then on May 8th, I was not able to attend that meeting. Is there any other meetings the board needs to report on?
Yeah, we had on May 6th, we had a Coachella Valley Irrigated Lands Coalition meeting. I think Director Nelson was there. I was on Zoom working through some issues with that group.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I was there, and yeah, I'm working on governance issues and trying to keep costs down. I did have another one on May 8th, a California Section 5 contractors meeting. Robert was on, Jim was on, a little bit different direction in the negotiation, so that was interesting to get the group's responses to. So.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no other meetings, is there a motion to approve per diem?
I'll make a motion.
There's a motion, there's a second. Can we please get roll call?
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay,
5-0.
any reports from our general manager?
No, sir, with the
No
interest of time.
reports? Any reports from council?
No, sir.
Okay, reports from departments? Don't see
No,
any.
sir.
All right, with that, we are adjourned at 11:31 a.m. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.